Even when I was so deep and hated Jesus and I wanted nothing to do with him, I was trying to disprove him. I was deeply involved with the Ouija board and all these other dark satanic practices, astral projecting every night and stuff. When I was overwhelmed and consumed by the darkness, if I would call out the name of Jesus, it would stop. All of it. Like the amount of times that I would lie to my family, to my friends, to cancel to go have sex with someone. The amount of times I would call out of work to go have sex. You know, like there is nothing I wouldn't be willing to do to go have sex. Like it would literally ran and controlled my life. Hello, my name is Phoenix, and this is how Jesus changed my life. Really, my testimony is a full life story of all 26 years of my life. So really got to start all the way at the very, very beginning. So first off, to kind of lay the groundwork, I come from a very I've come from a very Christian family. Both of my parents love Jesus, they love God, they have very deep relationships with him. And they both have their own testimonies and stories that led them there. But they were always very led by God, and they only wanted to do things as Jesus instructed them and never wanted to do anything that was outside of God's will. So that's kind of like the base of what I grew up in. And especially with my mom's side of the family, my uncle being a pastor and just everyone on that side of the family just being very Holy Spirit filled. My dad's side of the family, very good people and everything, but just not as close with God. But, so at a young age, my earliest memories in life, so we were living in Michigan. So my parents were from Michigan, a very small little town. Neighbors were the Amish, like literally super tiny little town where the biggest grocery store is connected to the gas station. And so it was there that we were living for like the first 5 years of my life. After my parents had me in Phoenix while they were at ASU, then once they graduated, they moved back to Michigan to be around family. And so my earliest memories in life there are honestly of some things that happened sexually between me and a family member. I'm not going to get too specific here because the way it happened, the other family member was very close to my own age, so there's no way that he should have known about the things that were happening, but I really had no idea. I just knew that it was supposed to be a secret and that I wasn't to tell my parents or anybody. So that was going on the first few years of my life, and I guess that I displayed signs to my parents and family that I was being sexually molested. And because I guess I was not a normal child and I had a lot of, I don't know what the signs are, to be honest, but I guess I had them all. And so it was kind of driving my parents crazy because they could not figure out who it was, and it almost drove them apart because then they started blaming themselves. And it was really driving crazy until one day my dad caught my male family member in the act and we ended up leaving. And that was what pushed us out of Michigan. Because then they were just like, oh, this is done. Like, we're not doing this. And they also realized that they missed Arizona and the sun and mountains anyway, so then moved back to Arizona. Starting in Michigan as well, some of my earliest other memories, besides those ones, were at night in my bedroom. I just remember always waking up feeling so scared because there'd be like this wolf in my room. And I would see it there. It was like a big shadow wolf. And people can say like, oh, you're just imagining. Like, no, but I knew what it was. I remember even as a kid, I would get annoyed when I would tell my family and they'd be like, oh, it must have been a bad dream. And I was like, no, it wasn't a dream. Like, I knew it was there. And I'd wake up and it would just be standing there at in my room trying to look at me. And it would always be this like coyote or this wolf, or there was a bear that would be there sometimes. And so I remember like being terrified. And when I would see it, the one night I would wait until like they were distracted with each other, like looking at each other. And I would get out with a blanket on my head and go like run out of my room into my parents' room. So first off, I remember that there, specifically in that bedroom. Then, once we moved to Arizona, I was probably like 6, 7 years old. Never saw those spirits again, or those, that wolf, bear, or the coyote. Those 3 separate ones. Once we're in Arizona, I just remember as a child, like every night going to bed was just horrifying. Like I was horrified too. And at this point, my brother was old enough, so we shared a room. We had bunk beds. And one thing I remember in this home, living out in Arizona, like out way past Queen Creek, we were halfway between Queen Creek and Florence. So if anyone knows that area, so literally the middle of nowhere. It was like our neighborhood in the middle of the desert. And then it was 30 minutes one way to one city, 30 minutes the other way to another city. So literally in the middle of the desert. At that house, I remember, I saw lots of things all the time. But at this time, I still didn't fully understand what I was seeing in the spirit realm. And but I just kind of would refer to things as demons and stuff because I had enough of a knowledge from what my family spoke about with these spiritual beings that like these things are real and that you rebuke them in the name of Jesus. And I noticed a lot of times they would leave when I called on the name of Jesus. But I remember every night going to bed, a lot of times being terrified because I was like, oh my gosh, what's going to visit me tonight? What am I going to see tonight? So in particular at this house, there was this one entity where the way my room was set up with me and my brother was like, we had bunk beds. Like I said, I was on the top bunk against the wall. So like, if I would lay it on one side, I'd be facing the wall. If I laid on the other side, I'd be facing our doorway leading out into the hallway. We would always sleep with the door open and there was a nightlight in the hallway. So with that nightlight, I could see the outline of pictures that we had hung up on like the wall in the hallway. And sometimes I'd wake up and there'd be a big shadow of a man blocking out the frames and stuff because like you could see it from the nightlight in the hallway. So it was a clear shadow. And I remember it was too tall to be Dad. And my mom's like super tiny, so it's not her. And so I was like, it was like the outline of a shadow of a man. And he'd always be blocking these pictures. And I remember when I would look at him, because I would be like, is that Dad or something? And then it would start walking towards me. And I would just feel overwhelmed with fear and dread. And then I would close my eyes. And then I'd open my eyes again, and he'd be all the way back against the far wall in the hallway. As soon as I start looking at him again, with my eyes open, he starts walking towards me again. Every time I would close my eyes, and then he'd be back every time I'd open my eyes again, he'd be back against the wall again. So I remember this guy, like, he was there like almost every night. And some nights he wasn't there. And I'd be like, I remember waking up in the middle of the night and being relieved. I was like, oh, thank God, like there's no man there. But one time I remember, like, I was like, what happens if I just let him get all the way up next to my bed? So I remember keeping my eyes open, and he walked up right next to my bed, and I just got like this fear and this dread like overwhelming me to the pit of my stomach. And I remember him right there, and I remember seeing his arms coming up to like reach up, like he was gonna reach up around to do I don't know what. And I just remember being terrified, so I closed my eyes and didn't open them again that night. And ever since then I think we changed the way the beds were, and so I didn't see him ever again. And I was really glad because then we started sleeping with the door closed too, I think. So I think I never had to see that particular entity again. Then too, so at a very young age, I remember just being absolutely upset. Like we were growing up Christian still. So like we're growing up with all the Bible stories and going to Sunday school every Sunday. And I remember just being absolutely obsessed with like cryptids and like, you know, like any cryptids are any creatures that aren't scientifically proven real, like Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster, Chupacabra, all that stuff. And like local legends and mythology and stuff. And I remember so many of these, I would just see things all the time everywhere, like these spirits. And I didn't know what to call them because even like back then as a child, I knew like angels and demons didn't seem fitting for everything. I was like, that's just not good enough. Like that doesn't explain everything. And I would see these things that then so perfectly describe, like so perfectly, I would see it so detailed and see its behavior, just like you would observe an animal. And then I would read some mythology book or read some book about folklore or legends. And I'd be like, oh, that's what I saw. And people would be like, no, that's not real. That's just a myth. That's just a legend. And I'd be like, well, And even as a kid, I was like, well, how would I, a child, somehow imagine in my head something that looks exactly like this, that behaves in the way and looks exactly how it looks in this book about mythology or some local legends that I've never read before. I've never seen that before. I've never seen that before. It's some obscure thing that most people don't even know about. And I was like, there's no way that someone else just happened to describe it in this book in the exact manner and description and the way that I would see it. And so stuff started like that started happening, and I was realizing, so even at a young age, I was like, okay, there's clearly more to this world than we're taught. And a lot of these things that are myths and legends or fake or are real, they're just obviously not everyone's able to see them. And I started realizing that even then. I was like, okay, obviously not everyone's able to see these things, because I would see these things around other people and no one else would even notice that. So then, as I started getting a little bit older as well, I was just like getting really obsessed into this stuff. On one hand, then on the other hand, I was also becoming obsessed with sex, and even at a young age. And I remember in 3rd grade when my brother got an iPod Touch, and like my parents put all these parental controls on it, but somehow I knew their passcode. So I remember one time when I was by myself with the iPod Touch, I like knew the passcode to undo all the parental warnings, because I didn't know anything about sex. I just knew it was something that you're not supposed to know about and stuff. And so I remember looking up, like I just like Google sex or something. And I remember that started all. And so then at any time, and then I would clear the history, like turn back on the parental locks and all this stuff so that no one would ever know. Then, so this was like a side thing. Whenever I was home alone or I had any spare time by myself I could get, I would do this with my brother's iPod Touch. This was when the iPod Touch first came out. You know, it was like the first touch screen. Everyone's like, oh, touch screen and everything, you know. So I remember that was like another aspect. So a lot of these things are kind of going on at once. That's why I have to share all this. So then on the other hand, I was starting to have like a lot of health issues as well. So I started noticing like I had this issue ever since I was a baby. I would just throw up like when I eat a lot. And like even as a kid, like, or as a baby and a child, like my mom said she would know, like she would get nervous like after feeding me and stuff because I would just throw up, and then I'd be fine the rest of the meal. And as I started getting older, that started getting more and more. More on that later. So then with the sexual stuff, I finally discovered porn. And this was probably, I was in 3rd or 4th grade. So I was probably like 9 or 10 years old. Just watching porn. And I remember getting so excited to be home alone for like an hour, 30 minutes or anything, just so then I could just watch porn. And I knew I wasn't supposed to be watching it and stuff. And I didn't understand what was happening to my body during it. And I just ended up discovering like masturbation, as one does at a young age. And even with this, I remember like getting into 7th grade, where then I remember some of the guys that I was friends with and would sit with at lunch started talking about like porn or something, and I'd be like, I remember thinking like, you're just discovering this? And I was like, oh, and I was embarrassed because I was like, oh, I don't want to say like, oh, I've known about this forever and stuff, because I felt like, oh, maybe that's really bad. I got the vibe that was like, that would have been so weird and stuff. So I was like, oh. And I remember just like being obsessed with sex, and like I could not all of middle school, all of elementary school, I could not wait to get to high school, because I was like, oh, I can't wait to get to high school to have sex, because then it's like socially acceptable to have sex. At least that's what I thought. And this whole time too, I'm still a believer. Like we're going to church every Sunday and Wednesday and stuff, but my faith in the church and Christians was slowly diminishing as I got older. So anytime that I would bring up anything remotely about the spirit realm, or remotely even mention some creature that I saw in the spirit realm that didn't fit the typical description of an angel or a demon, Christians would just be like, that's demonic, you shouldn't be seeing that. Or like, oh, that not real, or that would have been a bit dream, or oh, you mustn't have been imagining. And I would always just be like, no, I'm not. Like, I know the difference. And I would get so annoyed, even as a young kid. I was like, I know the difference between a dream and being awake. Like, I'm not stupid. Then also, the night attacks just kept getting worse and more traumatic. When I was really little, this was also in like 3rd grade, probably around the same time I started watching porn. I'd never made that connection until right now, actually. But, so definitely not a coincidence. But I remember started noticing some nights I would hear them. I would start seeing, sometimes I would wake up in the room and there would just be demons everywhere. Just like what you think of, like little goblin things and little black things. And like, sometimes I would just hear them talking and they're just talking about nonsense. Like they'd be like, oh, you're stepping on my foot. Oh, like, oh, look, he's awake. He can hear us. And they're like, oh, good. I hope he's not having more dreams. I hate to hear him like whine at night. And like, just like random stupid stuff. And they'll be like, why did they paint the wall this color? They're like, I don't know. It looks stupid. Like, I literally remember certain things so clearly because it was just like nonsense. And I would just be like, I just want to go to sleep. And I'll like covering my ears and stuff. And then they would just come closer and start like shouting and yelling in my face. And then as soon as I would wake my brother up or I would yell for my mom or dad to come in the room, it would stop instantly. And they would all disappear. It was like they were gone. And then I would just felt crazy. And it got to the point so bad where as soon as I would start falling asleep, I could hear them and I'd be like, or it would be like some nights it was there, some nights it wasn't. So some nights I'd be like, oh no, it's one of those nights because I would start hearing them as soon as I started falling asleep. And to the point where I remember then if I didn't sleep with my mom or my dad, then it would be horrible and I couldn't sleep because it would just, they'd be so loud. I couldn't sleep at night. And they'd just be like tormenting and like blowing on my face and stuff. And it was just getting so bad. And my parents knew about it and they would pray with me, but it just didn't seem to help. And then all this time too, I'm just constantly seeing things in the desert. Like it was kind of scary. So I didn't mind being in the desert. Like me and my friends rode our bikes out there. We'd had forts out in the desert and stuff like in the little mountains by our house and stuff. And so like during the day it was fine. But at night, as soon as sun would set, it would get terrifying. It was like the whole desert, the whole atmosphere would change and I hated it. And I remember just like always being like, I have to go home. Like I can't be outside at night or as soon as the sun sets. So that whole stuff is going on as well. Then it starts getting really bad to the point where I remember my parents, like one of them had to be sleeping with me and were just like praying over us, like over me and our house all the time and stuff. And it's just getting so bad. And they're like, what do we do like when prayer is not working or like I'm rebuking him in the name of Jesus by myself and they just keep talking and stuff. They're like just blabbering. And eventually it just kind of, I don't remember an exact time when it stopped. It just, the night voices and stuff kind of stopped. I think I remember one time because I remember God, I was like, God, even as a kid, I was like, I know I want to see these things, but I don't want to hear them. And so I think I asked him to turn them off, my hearing of the spirit realm. And so then from that point on too, I just would see things all the time, like coming in and out of the house through the desert. I remember being home one time and hearing someone. So anytime too, even as a kid, like I would get kind of scared to look in the spirit realm. It was like, it's not like I was seeing them physically. A lot of times I would, but a lot of times it was like another like sense, like in my mind's eye, where it was like, as soon as I would look in the spirit realm, I could see anywhere in the entire building that I'm in, inside, outside, no matter any room. I could see any in the yard, in the surrounding yards next to the house. I could see above in the sky. I could see underground, anything that was under there. And so as soon as I would look, it was like anything within a mile radius. I could feel every single spirit, angel or demon or anything that could sense me looking. And it was like then all the bad ones would immediately sense that and they would come rushing at me. And so as a kid, and then I would just turn it off because I would be so scared. So I remember one time being home alone and I felt like something was there. So I looked and then I was like, oh, I shouldn't have done that because it was something really scary. It was like this, had like this white ghoulish face and it was like this horse with like a melted skull thing. And I remember being terrified. It was in my hallway. So then I felt all these other entities around and I was like, so I went into the living room with a blanket over my head, turned on the TV so I could only see the TV, like with the blanket wrapped around my face. And I remember hearing doors opening and closing behind me. And I knew it wasn't my family because I was like, my family's not home for another few hours or whatever. I don't know where they were, but like, and I remember just being absolutely terrified. And then like they were turning off the lights and stuff. And I was just like fixated on the TV and just praying. I was like, God, please, like just help me and stuff. Then another time, another big incident I remember with thunderstorms. So where I used to live out in Arizona, we used to get massive monsoons every year, like July through September, massive thunderstorms. there'd be at least one giant one every year that would knock out all the power. And I remember these storms used to terrify me for some reason. And I remember even in the spirit realm, I could see these massive things in the clouds, like fighting and attacking each other. And then when there'd be lightning, it was like they were like fighting and throwing these bolts at each other and stuff like that. So really, it was just like always like really intense spiritually. And so I think I was just picking up on all this as a kid, and like even as a kid too, I was just always very spiritually sensitive and aware to people's energy. So I remember even like certain friends or certain adults I did not like being around. I didn't like going to their house because I think now looking back on it, I know I was picking up on their demons or spirits that were attached to them, or at their house I was picking up on. And there was other people where I just felt really safe around. And after what happened with my male relative when I was younger, even as a kid, I just had this inherent fear of men almost, where I didn't ever feel comfortable around men. I felt way more comfortable around girls. Like, girls were just so easy to talk to, and they were pretty and stuff. So I was like, oh, like and even most boys, I remember as a young kid, I think thought most boys were boring, because I was like, all they want to do is just talk about like cars or like sports, and like girls will like actually talk about things. So I remember like even as a kid, like I just had all these girlfriends because I thought the boys were boring, and then the girls would always like try to kiss me and stuff, and I thought that was fun. So then as I get older, like all this stuff is going on and the night stuff is just getting worse. Then my dad decides to go back to college to get his doctorate, so we moved to Iowa. So now we're in Iowa, and I noticed the demons seem to really subside. And I started realizing like, oh, maybe that's just a desert thing. Because when we were in Iowa, granted we were in like a city, but it was not like a big city. It was Bettendorf, Iowa. It's not a very big city. There was just like not nearly as much spiritual activity going on. And something else I found interesting is later when Jesus is talking in the Bible, when Jesus is talking about when you cast a spirit out, it says it goes and wanders dry places. So even right there, I was like, I remember hearing that as a young kid, that demons love the desert because they're dry places. And Jesus even said they flee to dry places. And I was like, even as a kid, I was like, oh, that makes so much sense. And it made sense then once we moved to Iowa, or even when we go back and visit family in Michigan, how there was like not nearly as much spiritual activity as there was in Arizona, especially out where we lived right near the reservation as well. So that was probably a big part of it as well. So that was something I noticed. So when we moved to Iowa, the spiritual activity severely lessened. But then, well, it's kind of a lie, but it lessened, but it changed. So then some nights instead, I would wake up absolutely paralyzed to things being in my room. It's standing over me, and sometimes it was a demon, and I always knew it was a demon. So sometimes I would try to ignore it, but I knew that it knew that I could see it. And so I knew like it was just like a game where I was like, I knew as soon as I looked, like it knew that I knew it was there. So there was no like ignoring it. So then it would just stay there feeding off my fear until I moved. And then until I finally like say, Jesus, get out, or like in the name of Jesus, leave, or like whatever. But a lot of times it was just like exhausting, and it was terrifying, like every single night to deal with this, like as a kid, you know? And so finally it must have been in 8th grade, because it was in Iowa. So it was like 8th grade, I remember finally I was like, I had to tell my parents about this. And so, it was because after one really scary encounter. So my dad and my brother were also always really interested in like the paranormal, supernatural, like me, and like cryptids and all that stuff as well. So we would watch like all these ghost hunting shows and like cryptid hunting shows, Bigfoot hunting shows, like all that stuff. And one time my dad was in the living room in our apartment in Iowa. He was watching videos on ghost boxes recordings, which if you don't know, a ghost box is something used in ghost hunting because they believe that spirits pick up on these energies really quickly, very easily. And so it's like a radio box where it just flips through stations. But if it's not flipping, it's just normally just white noise. But spirits, it's almost like a Ouija board, because it's like you ask things around and they'll answer through by flipping through stations to give you words to make sentences. So it's really creepy. Don't recommend looking into it. But it was a big thing on a lot of ghost shows, hunting shows that we watch, where you'd ask a question and it would take like, oh, what's your name? And it would say like, my name is Alice, because it's getting like those 4 words from like 4 different radio stations that it's quickly scanning through, you know? So he was watching videos of this on YouTube. And I remember I was in the bathroom, like getting ready for bed, like brushing my teeth or something. And I felt like a massive evil presence come into the living room. And so I go out there and look, and it's standing behind my dad, who's on the computer in the living room. And it's like this massive, if you look up, I remember this picture. So this isn't exactly what it looked like, but it looked very similar to this. If you know creepypasta, it was like a big thing back in the day. They had like all these crazy, scary stories. There's this one scary story called the Russian sleep experiment. If you look at a picture, if you look up just Russian sleep experiment creepypasta, one of the first pictures that comes up is what it looked like. It was like this emaciated man with like his teeth falling out and is like wrapped in like these linens, horrifying looking. But this being looked like that, but it was like 8 feet tall. It was like as tall as the ceiling because it was like hunched over in our apartment. And it had massive white feathered wings, but they were dirty. It looked like it had been rolling around in the dirt and mud. And it was missing a bunch of feathers. Like it was gross. Like it looked like it was mangled and it's been beat up. Like its wings were missing so many feathers. And it just radiated evil. And it was more powerful than any of these little demons I would see at night. Like I just knew it was different. And so in my head at that time, I was like, oh, it's a fallen angel. Like this is different. It's different than a demon. It's like one of the big ones. And I remember as soon as I looked at it, it looked back at me with this grin on its face. And I remember being terrified. So I go into the bathroom and I just start praying and stuff. And I remember like it came into the bathroom then. It like walked right through the door and I started like saying like, I rebuke you in the name of Jesus Christ. And it was just laughing at me and I couldn't hear it. So then I remember I didn't know what else to do. So I was like, okay, God, please send angels to help me and get rid of this thing. So then angels start pouring in and this one angel comes and stands between me and it. And it has like a lion's head. And I've later come to know him as my guardian angel. He's always like around with me. And he comes in and he like stands between us and he's like sticking his chest out and they're like doing like the chest thing and he's like pushing him out into the living room and then he starts talking to him but the spirit doesn't listen and then they both draw their swords and they start like sword fighting and then it's like eventually like my guardian angel was getting overpowered so then it was like he was summoning other angels and then all these angels were coming in and they were all attacking this massive big like fallen angel and they were all fighting it until finally they got it out of the apartment and they were fighting like out in the parking lot in our apartment complex. And I just remember being like, whoa, bro, like this is crazy. And like, I could feel it like finally when it left the apartment. And then all these other angels came into our apartment and they were drawing these symbols. I got the interpretation they were symbols of protection. Like on each of our walls, over each window, over each black screen in our house, over each mirror. And it was like there were these glowing blue symbols, like the same blue that I always see with the Holy Spirit. Whenever I see the Holy Spirit, the spirit realm in believers and stuff or out of pastors talking and stuff, it's always like this whitish blue fire. And so it was like they were drawing it out of this and some language, I don't know. It was some angelic language or something. And so I just remember that time I was like, okay, like I got to tell my parents about this because my dad doesn't even know what he just let in and stuff. So I remember telling my parents like, hey, like I can see the spirit realm. And they were like, and they were so affirming and so caring and like, I remember I was just like super grateful because they were super understanding and like they were like, honestly, that makes so much sense with all the stuff that happened in your childhood. And like they remember me like hearing all those voices and like seeing all these things at night and having such a hard time sleeping like my whole life because I was always terrified to go to sleep. And then also as a baby, they would tell me stories about how they saw me like playing with things or they would hear me laughing and talking to something and then they'd come in there and it was like I was interacting with someone, but there was no one there. Anything. So they always just assume like even as a baby I was playing with angels and stuff. So they were super supportive of it when it came out and then it was like this huge weight off of me because then I was like, oh, I don't have to hide this anymore. My brother was super cool about it. Like he was always like, oh, like what do you see here and stuff like. And so my family was super cool about it. And like I said, like both of my parents and like my whole mom's side of the family, they all had a lot of encounters with demons and stuff growing up. So like they know all this stuff is very real and they've always talked about it and everything, but now that I could like actually see it and stuff, so they were very affirming. Like they never once were like, you're crazy or you're imagining that. So that was really nice to have that support system at least, where now I could at least like openly talk about this stuff. So like I said, that was in 8th grade. So then during this time as well, I was just really getting addicted to porn at this point. So I remember just like really just being addicted to porn, thinking about sex like 24/7 when I wasn't thinking about angels and demons and spirits and all this stuff. Then Yeah. So, and then also my health issues were getting worse. So I was starting to throw up almost every single meal that I was eating at, where I would feel food get stuck in my throat while eating. And sometimes I could just chug water and it'd go right down. Other times the pressure would just build and build and build until it'd get hard to breathe. So I'd go to the bathroom and I would like stick my hand down my throat and make myself throw up. And then I'd be fine the rest of the meal. And I could eat the rest of the meal, no issue. So this was like kind of like a forced bulimic, but it was like, I was still eating everything. I was just like the first few bites that then I would have to go throw up. So this is going on. I don't think my parents definitely noticed because it was starting to become every single meal. So we started going to all these doctors for that. And we started going to all these medical doctors. They diagnosed me with like GERD and like all this other stuff. And like, I was just like, And so they started putting me on all these medications and stuff. Basically, they just diagnosed me with acid reflux and all this stuff. It doesn't really help. The medication would work for like a couple weeks at a time, and then I would start feeling it again. And it wasn't even actually stopping it. It was just making it so I didn't feel it. So this is like in 9th, 10th grade now where it's getting really bad. So then finally, we're just like, at this point, I'm like on all these medications, and then they started giving me the ones for the side effects because like I started getting these horrible side effects from this other one, and I just feel like crap all the time. So then we decided to go another route, and we go the naturopath route. So we go to this naturopathic doctor, and he discovers that it's just due to that it's all stemming from also before this as well, I had to get I ended up having to get a scope down my throat for all this testing, and like they could barely even get the scope down my throat because my throat was almost entirely shut because of how much scar tissue there was from all the stomach acid. So they were really concerned because they were like your throat's almost closed. You're going to get throat cancer, or you're just not going to be able to breathe or eat at all. And so they were scared they were going to have to do this one thing where they stick something down your throat and expand it. So they were really like freaking out about this. So that's why my parents and stuff were like, okay, this is really bad. Like we need to figure this out. And so that's why we finally went to this naturopathic doctor, found out that it was due to food insensitivity, that I was allergic to over 120 different foods that weren't giving me anaphylactic shock. They were just causing constant irritation. And these were things like that were in everything, like gluten, milk, soy, corn. Corn and gluten and milk alone are in literally everything. So I had to go on a 90-day cleanse where I took out all these foods from my diet. So it's like literally even a lot of fruits and vegetables I couldn't eat. So I was literally like the same 2 meals, 3 meals on repeat that I just kept eating for these 90 days. But I remember after like 2 weeks of doing it, I remember my throat felt so open. I was like, whoa. I was like, it's so easy to swallow. Like, who knew it was supposed to be this easy to swallow? Because my throat had been almost sealed shut and I didn't even know it. So we do all this, and like while I'm on this diet, then I'm going in and he's like helping heal me. I say all this because his health is very reflective of what's going on spiritually and inside me internally as well. So during all this time as well, my sexual addiction is just getting really, really bad. Sophomore year, I remember finally like I was dating girls and stuff, but I was getting impatient because I would date these girls and they wouldn't want to have sex, or like they weren't ready yet and stuff. And I remember like I didn't want to be like the douchebag that like forces them to and stuff. So like our mom was like, okay, I just want to have sex really bad. So I was 16, and I remember going on some site, and I'd always kind of had an interest where like I think it was partially due to what happened to me as a kid, where I thought I would be like at school and stuff. I would think a lot of guys were just as cute as like the girls were, but like I wasn't like actually attracted to them, at least so I thought. So I remember going on some shady websites that I was lying about my age and back then, and I found I just wanted to have like sex with a person. And so I found some really hot guy. And so I was like, oh, like I'll just do this. So I remember I lied to my parents and stuff. I was a very sneaky kid getting into high school, and this is what kind of started it. So I went and met up with this guy, and we hooked up and stuff. And afterwards, I just remember feeling disgusting with myself. And I was like, oh my gosh, what have I done? I finally lost my virginity. I was like, to a guy. I was like, oh, this is like disgusting. I was like, who am I? And I was like, never again, never again. And I remember being disgusted with myself. I like didn't look at porn or anything for like a while after that. And I was just like, never again. And so then, mind you though, I never cheated on any of my girlfriends or anything. Like I was always, it was when I was single that happened. So then I remember from there, I started making friends with the older grades at school as well, where I was always in advanced classes. I was in like all honors and AP classes and stuff. So it'd always be with like most of my classes were with the grade above. So like when I was a freshman, I was like with classes with like sophomores and juniors and vice versa. And then I was always involved in soccer, cross country and track. So like then I would have friends with on those teams that were in the older grades that were also like in classes with me. So I made a lot of older friends. And so I had like my main friend group that were in my grade, all my buddies that were my age. But then I was starting to make friends with these older people that were inviting me to hang out with them. And that led to drinking. And I was like, so I also started drinking when I was like 16. That's when I started going to parties. And I remember at first, like my other friends were like, bro, like we can't drink and all this stuff. And I was the bad friend. I was the one that was like, guys, it's not that big of a deal. Like it's so fun and stuff. And I was the one that like coerced and got all my friends into drinking and partying. And I remember the first time, like one of my buddies in high school that was in my grade, after I'd been to a couple parties now, he was like home alone one weekend and he had all of us over. And I remember we were like, oh, and I was the one that convinced us to sneak a bottle of his parents' like vodka or something. And so we started doing that. And then me and my friends all turned into very avid partiers. Started going to parties a lot, but I was always the one, I would get the invitations from like my older friends. And then like I could invite only the ones that they would allow or thought were cool enough or whatever. So then I was going to this a lot. And then I'm still always like talking to girls. I'm still like all this time, like I was just a raving, very sexually active person where I was always talking to some girl. Like I never was not like completely single. And I was always talking to someone, always flirting with someone, always going to make out with some girl, like just constantly. And I remember even one time talking to my friends about it and like, because one of my friends was like, I don't know what to text this girl or something. I was like, what do you mean? Just text her. And I remember I couldn't comprehend. I was like, why did they think it was like hard to talk to girls? Because I was like, I just been doing it my whole life, I guess. Not to sound like, I guess it sounds bad, but like, so I remember even then though, because then the conversation led and I remember they were like, because then I was saying like, I mentioned something about some girl texting me and they're like, what do you mean a girl texting you? And I was like, what do you mean? I was like, there's like lots of girls, they text me, they get their phone numbers from someone else or something. And they were all like just in shock. And I remember being like, oh my gosh, like none of them are, I just like assumed that every guy was like me and that they were all like making out with these girls and like meeting up with these girls and like trying to get them to do stuff. And like, I just remember that was like a really like big awakening. I was like, oh, I guess none of my friends are like this when none of them are even. Then my one friend that was talking about what to say to the girl, he was the only other one talking to one girl. And like none of my other guy friends in the group were like even talking to girls. And I remember just being like, oh, like, and like one of them I remember then brought up in like how he just discovered porn. And this was at 16. I remember just being like, whoa, like, am I hypersexual? I was like, at this time it was like kind of like that meme was like, am I the problem? You know, where I was like, oh, like, it's kind of like a bit of awakening for me. And I was like, oh, like maybe I need to chill out or something. And then I remember sometimes just being like, with all this stuff too, I never really fully processed or handled what happened to me as a kid sexually. And so part of the stuff that fed all this stuff was that I could not handle being alone, especially then because of the demons. Starting when we moved to Iowa as well, there was a demon that started following me around everywhere. And he just had this overwhelming presence. He was very tall. He was probably like 7 or 8 feet tall, very skinny, very emaciated, had like just a black face. So there was like no details on his face at all. And he had these huge, really long curling ram's horns that would like curl around, like really, really long, like in skinny horns though. And he had massive bat wings and he just had like these arms and like they each ended in just like a sharp point, but there was like, no details on him, like no like lines of fingernails. It was just like his finger was just like a big talon. And it was like he was just made out of like purple shadow. Excuse me. So then at this point, I remember the spirit he was always there. Like even with my friends and stuff, I would always look and he would always just be there. Sometimes he was farther away, like off in the distance. Other times he would be like right next to me. But whenever I was alone by myself, he would come and sit right next to me and just sit there and look at me. And I hated it. And he just made me feel so uncomfortable. And even that time, like even as I told you like a couple of the stories from when I was a kid, like I just hated being home alone. I hated being by myself. I couldn't handle it. And then I would start thinking about all this stuff that happened to me as a kid and stuff, and I didn't know how to process it and handle it. And then it started leading to, because then I was like, why do I find the boys at school so attractive as just like the women? Whereas like the women, like the men, it wasn't like an emotional, whereas like the girls were the only ones I was interested in talking to emotionally. But then it was like the guys, I still wanted to like hook up with them and stuff, especially after I hooked up with the one dude. I said I was never going to do it again, but then a few weeks later, I remember I just was like, it was like this uncontrollable urge in me that I was just like, I have to do it again. So I went back on these same, actually no, I didn't go back on those same websites. So this was at the time when I was allowed to have Twitter. And Twitter was the only social media that I was allowed to have to my parents, because they thought that Snapchat wouldn't be a good idea for me, which it wouldn't have been. So honestly, props to them for not allowing me to get Snapchat at that age. Same with like Instagram and all this stuff. But I remember Twitter was the one I really wanted, because Twitter, for whatever reason in Iowa, that was the one that everybody had. Like everyone that like, and so I wanted to fit in with my friends. I was the only one without a smartphone in high school. So I remember they were all in a group chat and I just still had a slide phone. So I couldn't be in the group chat. And so I remember feeling left out, because like we'd meet up on Monday and they'd be talking about the weekend. I'd be like, what? Why didn't you guys invite me? And they're like, we put it in the group chat. And I was like, I'm not in the group chat. I can't get it. And then they'd be like, oh, sorry. And so like, I remember hating this and just feeling so left out. So finally I remember begging my parents to let me create a Twitter. And so they finally did. So I was on Twitter, and then like, I never had a problem like making friends or anything at school. So like I always had a lot of friends. And like I said, then I was also making friends with like the upperclassmen and stuff. And then like I was involved in sports and like going to football games and stuff. So I'd make friends with like mostly the girls that I thought were hot at other schools. And then like we'd follow each other and stuff. But then I remember this one guy following me on Twitter. I just remember thinking, I was like, why was I so obsessed with him? And I thought he was just like so beautiful. But I remember even back then just thinking, I was like, oh, like, it's just like, I just really want to be his friend. I was like, that's it. I just really want to be his friend. Like, it's just that. And then I remember like he DM'd me and stuff. And he was like the quarterback at like one of our rival schools and stuff. And I remember, so then we started like DMing and stuff all the time. And then we started talking about like sexual stuff. And it started going there. And then I remember one time he wanted to meet up. And so then I was like, I was like, oh my gosh, like I don't even have to go on these like sketchy websites to find sex. Like I can do it this way. So then we did, once again, instant shame. I remember I blocked him on everything. I was terrified that I was going to be found out at school. And also especially because in high school here at this time, everyone would always like kind of suspect, like, Phoenix, are you gay? And I'd be so annoyed by that. First off, it really hurt as well, because of everything that happened to me as a kid. I was like, are you kidding me, God? Like, after everything that happened to me as a kid with my male relative, and then that I don't understand, and then I hate and all this stuff, and then everyone just assumes or like thinks I'm gay. Like, it seemed like a joke. And it was just like, I was like, are you kidding me? Like, that really started driving a wedge between me and religion, especially, because then I was like, God, this seems like a sick joke. And it would just, excuse my language, it would just piss me off, because I was like, all my friends knew at this point. I was like, you guys know that I'm literally talking and pulling more girls than any of you guys, and you still think I'm gay sometimes? Where then like, it would always be like a joke kind of, but then it was like constantly like, Phoenix, like, are you gay? Or like, it was just constantly, and I would always be like, no, like, what do you mean? Like, and I would get so annoyed. But then part of me was always like, oh, am I? Because I was like, why do I find these guys attractive? I already hooked up with a couple of guys now and stuff. And I was like, no, but like, I would always just tell myself like, no, it's just like a purely like only when I'm really lustful, you know, and like in that mood. I was like, it's not, I would never date them or anything like that. I was like, I'm only dating women and stuff. And so then I started doing like sexual stuff with some girls that I was dating or talking to at the time as well. But I remember even realizing, this sounds so bad to say out loud, but I remember back then realizing and thinking, I was like, wow, it is so much work to have sex with a girl. And I remember being like, with guys, it's so easy. Like with the guys that I would do it with, I was like, it was just like like, hey dude, you're really hot. And he's like, oh yeah, you're really hot too. And then we'd just like talk and it happens. And so I remember like seeing like at that young age, at 16, when I would start seeing like, oh, like if I just want like sex right away and I want it now, like I can just hit up a guy. And so that's kind of how it started. Sorry, there's a lot to consider.
You're good.
So came to that realization, and I was still like dating girls, but it was like this weird like separation in my mind where I was like, oh, like I'll date girls, but then I'll just hook up with guys when I need it. So then, and once I started having sex too, the porn addiction kind of died off, because then anytime I'd want to watch porn, I'd be like, why would I watch porn when I could just go have sex? So that like wasn't really a thing anymore. But then all this stuff was stemming from, oh, that's right, the demon of loneliness. So with that, I could not handle being alone. It was just like too much like emotionally of stuff I didn't know how to deal with from my childhood. Just stuff with the spirits that I was seeing that I didn't know what to deal with. And so like, I literally could not handle being alone. So I made sure like I was always a very, very active person socially, where I had so many different friends, and I had several different friend groups where I was always like, oh, if they can't, my first friend group, my main friend group, if they can't hang out, and if none of them can hang out, then I'll hang out with these ones. Oh, if they can't, then I'll do this and this. And then if none of them could hang out or something, then I would just go hook up. Then I would go find someone to have sex with. So it kind of became my fix or my vice as my coping mechanism, where I was like, oh, if I am sad about something, I just broke up with my girlfriend that I'm really sad about, I'll just go hook up and then I'll feel better about it. Then if, I'm really mad at my friend for saying that thing, I'm just going to go hook up and have sex about it. Like I would literally start doing that with everything, like literally everything. So then too, I was also partying a lot, and mind you, my parents, I don't know if I think they found out about this stuff, and from stuff they've told me later, but they knew that I was going to do it no matter what. So like, I would even have like, I was so bad, dude. Like I would have like fake friends where I'd be like, oh yeah, I'm going to, I don't even remember it, but like John's house. And whenever who's John's house, that's like my code word for myself when I was going to hook up with someone. And my parents would think like, oh, he's going to John's house. Like they would think it was some kid that lived in this one area. And then they would even start tracking my phone with my location. So I got really sneaky so our school that I went to, my high school I went to in Iowa, they give us a free iPad at the beginning of the year that you'd have with you, which I think that's a horrible mistake to give to high schoolers, but we'd have that. And so I don't remember how exactly I did it, but I would somehow do it where I'd leave my phone somewhere so the location was on, and then I would use my iPad to like message and use my messages and stuff. But yeah, so pretty much that happened. Then, so I was always constantly sneaking up to have sex or go party, or I was even, the sex started getting really bad to the point where I started having all these connections, and I would just like know the guys that were down for it and stuff, and like, or around at other schools. So like, I would just start building networks, not good guns. And I would start lying to my friends about it because I just wanted to go have sex. And it just literally, that became like it started off as a vice and like a coping mechanism, but then it really just turned into like it was turning into a full-blown addiction. Then at the same time, then I was partying, and like, mind you, a lot of my friends, all my friends are still virgins, all my close friends, not a single one. I remember I had a couple friends in my upperclassmen that were some of the guys that were like juniors and seniors that had sex with like their girlfriend or their ex-girlfriend. And they were the only ones that knew that I had also had sex, because even then I couldn't even tell people what I remember. One time I was honest with my friends and told them how many girls I didn't tell them about the guys I hooked up with, because I didn't want anyone to think I was gay, even though they already thought I was. So I would only tell them about the girls I hooked up with that I was talking to, and then I would just not leave out all the guys, and they wouldn't believe me because it was like they thought it was too much, and they're like, bro, there's no way that you slept with each of those girls, like, and stuff. And I remember, so even then I remember like kind of feeling ashamed of it and stuff. And then this demon of loneliness, which I later found is literally, it was a spirit of loneliness, because even when I was around people and stuff, I felt like alone, and I just had all these issues in myself that I wasn't fixing. Mind you, then my health issues were still getting worse. So that's kind of like when we're dealing with all this, like, so all that health stuff I was describing earlier with the naturopath doctor and getting my health on track was all going along on the side. Then another aspect that's going on with my religion and stuff. So growing up too in Arizona, where we grew up, like I said, out in the middle of nowhere, like we were going to a charter school. It wasn't a Christian charter school, but everyone there was Christian or Mormon. So it was pretty like that. And we were very involved in the church we were at in Arizona growing up, all through elementary school and like beginning of middle school. So like I was always just around Christians. And I remember even as a young kid having a hard time, like I said, like I always thought girls were like way easier and more fun to talk to and hang out with. But then even some of the guys I would make friends with, I would just be like, why is everyone so weird? And I would just remember thinking that, and like thinking that all these Christians, even at churches, like even some of the adults, I was like, they're just weird or like cringy. I just thought they were cringy. And I remember once we went to Iowa and we moved to Iowa, and now I'm at a public school. And so we moved there the summer before me going to 8th grade. So when we moved there, I remember making some of my friends and stuff, and they weren't Christian. I was like, oh. And I remember just feeling so relaxed around them, and I never felt like they were weird. Like they never like, cause sometimes I remember growing up in elementary school and stuff, some of my friends would do things and I'd be like, and I just thought that was just how people were. So I was like, you're just weird. But I think it was just like, I don't know, people at that school or something. And so I remember coming to associate, and then I was still joined a new youth group that we were going to there at our church. But I started noticing, I was like, oh, the only people at this youth group are other weird kids. And I was like, oh, if all the Christians are weird, all the non-Christian people are normal. And so even then in high school, I remember thinking that and seeing that, but like, I wasn't going to tell my super Christian family that and stuff. So like, and then all I really started caring about was partying and sex. And anytime I would try to bring up anything remotely spiritual about the things I saw spiritually and stuff, people would just shut it down. They would dismiss it and stuff. So I was like, okay, Christians, like, they don't even know what to talk about this stuff. They're all just weird and cringy. I want to hang out with the normal people that are actually cool and actually want to party and like, just stuff like that. So then I started kind of drifting away, and like, I would still go to church with my parents and stuff, because I wasn't going to be like ungrateful. Honestly, I love my parents, and I literally, through all this, like, I have nothing bad to say about them. They did everything right, and I was the entire problem in the relationship and everything. And like even everything I did that I was so sneaky, like they were never like overly strict. They were like they were strict, but they were like good. They were just good parents, honestly. And they were really my rock and my like foundation I've come to see in my life, where I just knew I could always rely on them for anything, no matter how far gone I was, no matter what. Like, even when my parents knew that I was drinking and stuff, they'd be like, my mom would be like, okay, if you're going to go to that party, she's like, I know you're going to sneak out even if I don't go and stuff. So she's like, let me pick you up at least, please. She's like, I don't want you driving and stuff. So I was like, okay. So my mom literally comes and picks me up from parties. Yeah. So like, very honestly, just solid parents. Like, I have nothing bad to say about them. And they were just like my core and what kept me grounded. And so all this time though, with God, once I built that relationship with God from such a young age, because it was just so ingrained in me from my parents and stuff, that I could never deny him, you know? So even this time when I was pushing away Christianity and stuff, I was like, even all this stuff I was seeing spiritually and all these experiences, a lot of stuff I was seeing, like, I didn't know how to fit that into the Bible. That's like, so another crazy experience that happened in Iowa, I remember, so like, we lived in an apartment, right? And we had a dog. And so we were on the first floor. So like, we had a little sliding glass door that led to a little patio. And then in that patio, you open a gate and it led to like this big grassy area between like all these apartment buildings. So like, we'd always go like we have to let out the dog so she could go pee. So like one night I was doing it before bed, and I remember like seeing this wave come in the night sky in the spirit, but it's like I was seeing it physically, but it's so hard to describe. It's like it's happening at the same time, but like different. So I was seeing this wave of color, and it was like this pinkish, like purplish color, also mixed with like this like turquoise, like bluish green color. And it was like both of these colors like mixed in this wave of in the sky. And it was coming across the sky, and I remember being like, what the? And then I was seeing, then looking down on the ground, I saw this huge horde of people and animals, but they were all made out of that same light, like this pinkish green color, like just swirling around. And but they weren't wearing clothes, but they didn't have like any features on them. It was just like they were just beings made out of that light, and animals, like any animal. Like there was like bison, wolves, foxes, lions, dogs, cats, cheetahs, gazelle, like literally everything. Just like this whole horde of people and animals made out of this light, and they each had like a string connecting them up from their head or their back all the way up that led up and connected into the wave of light in the sky. And I was just like, and they rushed past me, and as they rushed past me, I just felt overwhelmed with joy. And it was like just like a beautiful experience. And I remember just like looking as they all like ran around me, and they were all just like laughing and smiling and stuff, and like just this wave of pleasure and like happiness just like washed over me, and then it was gone. And I remember seeing the wave of color go across the night sky, and I was like, huh. And I remember at that time, I was like, that was interesting. And I remember at that time specifically, I was like, did I imagine that? I was like, I feel like I have to be imagining this. The next morning, when we're getting ready for school, my mom has the TV on. She would always have the news on in the morning. So the area we live in is called the Quad Cities. And I'm just like eating my breakfast, and like I hear the news on. I'm not really listening because I thought it was boring. But I remember them saying like, oh, and the northern lights were seen in the Quad Cities last night. And I remember looking up at the sky, and then they were showing some footage some people took in the Quad Cities of the northern lights. And I realized from those pictures that the colors of the northern lights were the exact colors that I was seeing of those waves. And I remember being like, bro, did I just see the northern lights in the spirit realm last night? And then I remember from some movie I watched as a kid called Brother Bear, where in that movie, they talk about how the northern lights, they call it the running of the spirits. The Native Americans did in that movie, which I don't know if that's true. I've looked it up, and I've found a few passages online that where some Native American cultures call it like the running of the spirits, or they believed it was like spirits like that. So I remember being like, huh, like, wow, I guess that was like a proof right in my face right there. Like God's like, no, what you're seeing is real. Because I was like, I didn't tell anybody about that experience. I didn't even put it together in my mind that it looked the same colors as the northern lights. We lived in Iowa. What are the chances the northern lights are even there? The next morning, it's all over the news. It was like got confirmation from God, where I was like, okay, like I'm seeing this stuff. So like at this point in my life, I could tell you lots and lots of stories like that, where it's like I knew at this point where I was like, I was seeing what I was seeing. And I knew that it wasn't false. I just knew that, to me, I just saw that Christians didn't have the answers, because they didn't have an answer for that. What would they have called that? Oh, it's a demon. They would have just said, it would annoy me when you talk about Christians about anything remotely spiritual, because they're just like, that's demonic. Like, you should have prayed again. And I'm like, no, I have felt demons. I see this demon of loneliness constantly following me around. I know what a demon feels like. Like, this was not demon, but it was those spirits I saw with the northern lights. Those weren't angels. Like, when you see an angel from God, it's like just holy. Like, there's no other way. Like, you can feel the holiness of God radiating from it, and it's like they're just pure. They embody just pure goodness and stuff. But like this, yeah, it brought a lot of joy and stuff, but it wasn't like an embodiment of like joy or like that good stuff or holiness. So like I knew it wasn't an angel, but I was like, Christians don't have the answers for this. So I was like, okay, there must be some other religion that's right. And then also at this time, I was like, all these Christians are this weird and cringy and stuff. And like, I even started telling my parents, I was like, I don't like, it was a fight every like Wednesday night to make me go to the youth group. Cause I was like, Mom, I don't want to go there. Like, I was like, they're just weird. I'm not making friends or anything. I was like, I already know every story that they talk about, every sermon. I was like, I grew up in this. Like, I know everything they're talking about. Like, I just felt like they were just very superficial, like didn't even know anything about anything spiritually, didn't want to go deep at all. So I was just annoyed with Christians. So with all this, then it goes into, so then my dad, so the whole reason we moved to Iowa, like I said, was so my dad could go back to school to get his doctorate. So he ended up getting his doctorate. And we then were going to move back to Arizona, back to Gilbert, Arizona, where he was going to open up his practice, because my whole family hated Iowa. I was the only one that liked it there, and it was really just because of all my friends and everything. So I remember I was like devastated to leave. I had been dating this girl for like 3 months. We've been like talking, whatever. I don't know. We went to homecoming together and all this stuff. And like, I thought I was like in love with her and all this stuff. And I hadn't been having any sex. I hadn't been watching any porn or doing anything since I'd been dating her and stuff. And I was like, And I just did not want to leave. And I had like all my best friends there and stuff. And like, I did not want to leave. I was really mad at my family for moving. And so we moved halfway through. We moved in November of my junior year. So like halfway through junior year, you know, that's a tough time anyway. So I moved to Gilbert, Arizona. During this time too, my mom got sick with like mono somehow. It was like getting spread around at work or something. And like, if you don't know, mono is like really bad and sick. And so then a couple weeks after she got diagnosed with it, I got it right after we moved to Gilbert, Arizona. So I started at my new school there. I was trying out for the soccer team and everything. And I went there for literally 2 days. The third day, I was so sick I couldn't go to school. Found out I had mono. Missed almost 4 months of school. So at this time in my life, this was honestly the lowest points of my entire life. I was already super sad about leaving my girlfriend and all my best friends and my entire life in Iowa. So I already hated being alone. I couldn't handle being alone. Now, with mono, I was in a new place where I don't know anybody. I don't have any friends. I don't have anyone. And I'm stuck at home all alone because both of my parents have work all day and my brother has school. So I was stuck at home alone in this new city completely by myself with nothing but my thoughts and nothing but Twitter to see all my friends still posting, hanging out together and stuff, and just sad that I'm not there. So this is when I really started to spiral. So even while I had mono, and then the demons started coming, you know, just like they do, because now I know that they are attracted to and enhance negative emotions and behaviors. I didn't know that at the time. I thought they were just attracted to me because they knew I was vulnerable. And then they would just come and surround me. And thank God I couldn't hear them anymore like I could when I was a kid, but I would see them and it would just freak me out, it would stress me out. They just radiate negativity. So demon of loneliness literally embodies loneliness. It's radiating that constantly. Demon of depression, radiating depression. Demon of self-hatred, radiating self-hatred. Demon of self-rejection, radiating self-rejection. You know, couldn't handle it. I already hated myself as it was. So from everything that happened to me as a kid, and then like just all this guilt and this shame from hooking up with people and then feeling gross about it afterwards. And it was just really bad. And so then I remember one time, too, this demon of loneliness that kept following me everywhere, I got sick of it. And I remember being home alone with it, and it was just sitting on my bed, and I was like, get out of here. I was like yelling at it. I was like, please leave. And it was just staring at me with its blank face. And then it just put a hand on my shoulder, and I just felt cold and so lonely and hopeless. And I remember just laying on the floor and being like, my life is pointless, like everything's stupid, like I just wanted to die. And never before in my life had I ever wanted to die. I didn't want to kill myself, I just wanted to die. And I was just remember begging there, I was like, God, just take me, like life is awful, like this is horrible. And then I remember while doing this, I was like, why won't this spirit leave when I rebuke it in Jesus' name? And I remember being so sad. And I heard God so clearly. Right then and there, he told me, you need to rebuke it from your heart. So I was like, okay. So I looked at the demon of loneliness. I said, I rebuke you from my heart instantly. It was gone. Never saw it again. Never came back. And I was like, interesting. So then as well, I started noticing around the house, certain spirits would only be in the same room when I would see them. So I started noticing that. And I was like, Then I started noticing I could feel energy pulsing from certain objects. So I'd be like, oh, it's attached to that object. So then I would get rid of the object, never see the demon again. I saw it would have to go wherever it went. I was like, okay. One time, my dad started testing this so like at my grandma's house in Michigan, she lived out in the middle of nowhere, right? Like out in the country. Like I said, all their neighbors were the Amish, lived in an old farmhouse. We tested this, where in this house, my entire mom's side of the family, my grandma on my mom's side, everyone hated this one room upstairs. She had this one room upstairs that she used as like an attic, where she just had all the storage from all this stuff from my grandpa from when he was alive, and like just all this old stuff. And there was a bedroom that was connected to it. They had a door that you could walk in between each one. And everyone hated sleeping in that bedroom. Even growing up, me and my brother, we were like, we're not sleeping in the scary room. And so we would call it that. And I remember one time at dinner, even with all the family, like all the cousins, all the aunts and uncles and stuff, someone said like, no, I don't want to go in the scary room. And everyone got quiet and we're like, you know about this? You don't like the scary room either? And then like we all started sharing stories about all of us, how we hated sleeping in that room. And my grandma's like, you guys are being ridiculous and stuff. And we're like, no, grandma, like there's something in there. Like you could always just feel something watching you and stuff. And I remember at that house too, she had a piano downstairs and it was right underneath the scary room. And I remember anytime playing that piano, I would see a woman appear in the room pacing up and down like the room. And it was like this woman in like this torn up bridal dress. She had like mascara streaking down her face, but I knew it wasn't actually a woman. Like it looked like a ghost, but sorry to break it to you, but I don't think ghosts are real. They're always demons pretending to be ghosts. We'll get into that maybe some other time, but anyway, so I knew it was a demon because I could feel it. And anytime anyone would play the piano, I would see her appear. Told my dad this and my parents this. So my dad was like, I think I know what object she's attached to. Because then at this point, I'd share with my family and stuff my revelation about how demons can attach to objects and how you can just get rid of the objects and stuff to get rid of them. So I told him this and he tested it. So he went upstairs and grabbed this object that he thought it was. And he told me, so he had me go out of the house first. And then he moved it around. And then he had me come back inside and tell me where I saw the woman. I saw her downstairs in the basement around the boiler. And he was like, I remember his eyes. He was just like, bro, like, because that's exactly where he moved it. He put the statue right next to it. So then he had me go outside again, did it again. Then I saw her upstairs in the hallway between the bedrooms, right next to the bookshelf. And I went and picked out the object. I knew exactly where the statue was because I could feel it. And so that really proved it to me as well. So then we got rid of the object, never saw that woman in the house again. No one ever thought that room was scary again. So that was like another thing. So these things have been going on as well that God has just been kind of proving to me and showing me like how the spiritual stuff works and how it's not, just because it's not laid out word for word in the Bible doesn't mean it's blasphemous and that's not biblical. So anyway, I still at this point in my time, I just thought like Christians were stupid and didn't know what they were talking about, didn't know anything. So now back to the story. So back in Arizona, right, where I'm home alone all the time for months, I start going on some really bad websites again. And I start meeting up with guys, even while I had mono, and lying about my age. So probably passed around a lot of people. It was only exclusively guys because I remember the women on that website I thought were disgusting and not attractive at all. So I was like, guess it's only guys. And so I remember I had all these fake accounts on my phone and stuff, and I had to turn in my phone every night, by the way. So this is all, we moved there. This is when I'm 17 now, okay? So my junior year of high school. And I still have to turn in my phone every night. So every night before bed, I would make sure I closed out of all my fake accounts on all these apps I had and all these websites and emails and all this stuff. And one time I remember, still was sick with mono, while I fell asleep downstairs on the couch. And I remember waking up and it was really late and I was super groggy and tired and I just went up to bed. Didn't realize that I left my phone there. I wake up at like 2 or 3 in the morning to my dad waking me up. And he said, hey, you need to come into our room right now. And I was like, what? And then as I'm walking there, I get this pit in my stomach and I'm like, what's going on? And then I walk into my room, to my parents' room. My mom is sitting on the bed, holding my phone, sobbing. And I was like, my pit just dropped in my stomach and I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, no. And they saw everything. And when I say everything, they saw literally everything because I had pictures on there. And they saw all my messages, all my fake accounts, all this stuff, and it's all with these guys. And they see my messages. They see that I was inviting people over, that I was sneaking out places. They were not happy, but moreover, they were just sick. My mom to my dad was like, I knew it. I knew something was wrong with him, and I kept feeling it. And she's like, I knew it. And then my dad and they're just like both sobbing. They're like, why don't you talk to us about these things? They're like, and then now they realize like all these times I'd lied to them in Iowa, all throughout high school, like all these times I was like going to hook up with people and all this stuff. And they just, so to break it to you, like before this, they thought I was like this perfect little Christian boy, where I told you like, I thought Christianity and the Bible was stupid and dumb, but I never let my parents tell them that. I thought that would be disrespectful. So I didn't tell them that. So I kind of played up this image of like this good, false little Christian that they thought their son was, that I just like to party sometimes. They didn't realize how deep it went and how much I was really struggling mentally. And honestly though, I remember at that point in time, even that night, some part of me was so relieved. because it was like I knew that I was spiraling really bad and I was going really, really dark, where I knew that this sexual addiction that I had was gonna get really bad. And I was just this loneliness and not talking about what happened to me as a child, and like it went back to that, and my parents were like, are you gay, and all this stuff, and I was like, no. I was like, I remember just sobbing, and I was like, I don't know. I was like, I just want sex, and like it's just easier with men and stuff. And like I remember, so then they were like wanting me to talk, and I was like, I do not want to talk to my parents about my sexual stuff and everything. So then they were like, okay, well, you have to talk to someone. And I agreed to go to a therapist. So I started going to Christian counseling like once a week or whatever. It did really help a lot. And I remember they lost complete trust in me too. So like no phone privileges, no anything privileges. So then I'm still kind of suffering with loneliness because I'm still in a new place. Now that I'm better to go to school, I go to school and everyone's like, oh, weren't you that new kid a few months ago? And I was like, yeah. Then I got mono, so I was gone for 4 months. Then all the friends I make, like I said, I was in really advanced classes. So then all the friends I make were the seniors that were about to graduate. So they all graduate. So then that summer, I'm back to square one where I have no friends again. Going to this stuff, and he's really helping me deal with the Christian counselor. He really did help me deal with a lot of self-hatred and self-rejection I had, which was at the root of a lot of issues in my life. So that helped with a lot. Then I remember, and I started joining the sports teams again and stuff. And so I started doing cross country. I was sick of soccer at that point, so I didn't even want to try out for soccer for my last senior year. I was like, I'll just do cross country and track. So I do that, and like I'm kind of excited to start new again senior year, because I'm like, well, I was like, I'm wipe the slate clean. Like, there's not going to be any rumors about me being gay, and like I don't feel like I have to prove myself by like trying to get with the hottest girls in the grade to just make people think I'm not gay. So mind you as well, I will say the stereotype about people that are really mean to gays or homophobic are probably dealing with it themselves, because I was so mean to all the openly gay kids in high school. At my school in Iowa, I would say, never to their face, but I said some awful things that I feel really bad about. But it's because I was projecting, and I was like, oh, like all these people already accusing me of being gay, like I can't let them think I'm gay, so I'm gonna make jokes and like trash these guys. And so then senior year of high school, I remember like I made some really good friends and stuff, and like I finally had stopped like hooking up and all this stuff, and like I was finally like, because I was kind of out of force because my parents found out about everything and stuff. So I was doing a lot better, honestly. But then it started again, this desire for sex. So I started like slowly getting back into it, and like started like trying to build the new network there in Gilbert, and like trying to find the guys that were interested and stuff. And so then I started doing it a few times, but then each time I'd always be like, oh, like, what am I doing, Phoenix? Like, come on, this is ridiculous. Then I would like date these girls. So I was always trying to have like a girlfriend, because then when I was in a relationship, I didn't have eyes for anyone else or anything. So then I was like, okay, like as long as I'm in a relationship, then I'll be fine. Like I'll be good and everything. So then I start doing that. Whatever, senior year goes by. Not much more really happens that time. Like my health is finally under control, because that's the other thing. So my throwing up and everything, it went away when we started getting help with the naturopath doctors, and they helped with everything. Then all the inflammation and all other, like I just constantly felt achy and sickly and had all these other health issues just like in general, but nothing like life threatening. But it all went away once I started going to therapy and getting out, and because I realized it was because of all the stuff going on inside that I didn't talk about, that was manifesting outwardly, physically. So once I get rid of all that stuff, everything just starts getting better. Like I start healing and everything. So now we're going into college. I graduate from high school, and I didn't want to. Most people where I was going were going to go to ASU, because that's like the closest college. It's like 40 minutes from my high school. I did not want that. I was sick of Christianity. I was sick of playing this good little Christian boy to my family and my friends. And I just wanted to be able, honestly, I just wanted to be able to have sex and party as much as I want, without any worry that my parents or my family or anyone I know was going to interfere with that lifestyle. So I went to NAU, and NAU up in Flagstaff also was by far the cheapest option. I got so many scholarships and stuff there for my grades that I didn't even, ended up, I would get like a check each semester by how much extra I had left over after getting everything paid for. So it was just all in all the best option. Beautiful up there. I was really big into outdoors and hiking, so like there was a lot of that out there too. So I go up there. First thing I realized is that the spirit realm is incredible. The veil that separates the physical and the spiritual is very, very thin in Flagstaff. Okay. And so at this time, I remember spiritually, I was deciding, I was like, okay, like the Bible and Christianity is obviously just a stupid thing for control and all this stuff. I was like, obviously it's not true. So I was like, there must be something that's true, because all these things that I'm seeing, and like, I never once doubted the existence of God as well. Okay. So like, that's one thing that was always there, where it's like, we always had that, like that bond and that connection where I could never deny him. So even like that, I remember still talking and praying to God. I was like, God, the Bible just can't be right. That just doesn't make sense. So I was like, okay, like you gotta help me. And so I wanted to learn objectively. So I started studying on my own free time. Like I started studying every religion. Islam, you can debunk Islam archaeologically and historically if you really try. I did that in like an hour. Like it's not even hard, honestly, if I'm being honest. Then like Buddhism, like I looked into like Hinduism, Sikhism, Jainism, like literally everything, Judaism. I studied everything. I studied their texts, their gospels. Like I just wanted to know the truth. The only things that really resonated with me were the New Age teachings on spirituality and stuff in the occult. So at this time as well, I told some of my friends that I was living with, or not that I was living with, they were in like my dorm building. So in particular, I had these so I had a couple of friends groups. Again, like I said, I was always very social. So like I had a lot of different friend groups. So this one friend group I had, that all lived in the same dorm building as me. These two girls and this guy. So the four of us, I told them the one time that I could see in the spirit realm and stuff. And I remember they were like, oh, and so then they told a bunch of like our bigger friend group that we had. Then, and mind you, this time, like, I'm just like partying and like hooking up all the time. Just like literally like what you think in college, like I was going crazy. Then, so everyone knows me just as like this party guy. And that's how I was making so many friends, because then I would go out, party, and like make all these new friends, then make those friends, and then go out with them the next night. And just like I had all these connections and stuff. So everyone just knows me as that. So even my friends are like, I don't believe you and all this stuff. But then, so then they wanted to test it. So one of my friends had a Ouija board that they brought up there. So and this is weird, but like on either side, well, actually I'll get to that later. So in Flagstaff, so we started going out to the middle of the forest. We'd go someplace and do a Ouija board. Because none of us wanted to do it in our own dorm rooms, of course, because we were smart enough for that. Oh, I did start playing with a Ouija board in high school, actually, though. So let me back up. So in high school, when I was still living in Iowa, these friends I had, one of them, we were all hanging out at his house once. There was a few girls and a few of us guys. And he was like, we started talking about it somehow with the Ouija board came up. And I didn't tell any of them that I could see the spirit realm. They were all too like not spiritual like at all. So I wasn't about to tell them that. But so these friends, so we got out a Ouija board at his house, and there was like all these rules. We looked up all these rules because I guess there's a couple of them had done it before, and they said there's all these rules like, so you can't take the planchette is what the piece that moves around the board is called. No one, once you're on the board, you can't just take your fingers off the planchette. That's a rule. We all have to sit in a circle. We all have to be touching. There can't be any breaks in us in the circle, or else things can get out, supposedly. There's all these things. You have to say hello. You have to say goodbye. There's all these set rules. There's all these warnings too. Like you have to stop if someone in the group is getting addicted, if someone in the group is getting really tired or passes out, if someone in the group starts behaving abnormally, or if there's something else, if you start feeling really drained or something. And so we're like, okay, like we read all these rules and stuff. And I was so excited to do this because I was like, oh my gosh, like I just wanted to engage with the spirit stuff. I was so hungry and ravenous for anything spiritual. So we started playing with it, and at first it doesn't work. And so then I remember looking and I saw something. And so in the spirit, I remember telling it like, hey, come over here. And then it started moving, and we could all feel like all the hair stand up, like it all starts moving and stuff, and moving, speaking through us. And then it starts trying to go in a circle and stuff. And so then we break it because it's trying to get out, like make a portal or something. So we break it. And I remember I was hooked. I was like, okay, let's do it again. And we did it again. And more, I noticed like more and more demons kept coming around us. And they'd always pretend to be dead people when I could see them. And I was like, you're clearly like this goblin looking thing. You're not a dead you're not a dead Native American, like you're saying, or like, oh, you're not some dude that died 2 years ago in the house. Like, it's not. So like, even then I started realizing I could see, I was like, okay, so demons lie about what they are. So with this, we're playing, and I remember my friends were getting where they're like, Phoenix, you're getting really like way too into this. They're like, we got to stop. And so I remember the last time we were playing too, one of the light bulbs burst in the downstairs, and like my friend, the girls all scream, and then they turn the lights back on, and the one girl's like, I'm getting really tired, guys. And she like could not keep her eyes open. She just kept wanting to take a nap. And I was just like, guys, let's keep playing. Like, I was getting like addicted. So we had like all the symptoms that you were supposed to stop, like each one of us. So we're like, okay, so what, a couple of the friends, the ones that owned the board and the house, he was like, okay, we're stopping this. He's like, guys, we need to stop. Like, so we did. We did it a couple times, and then I moved to Arizona. So I didn't do it anymore. So then back in college, in my freshman year, I found this group of friends. They want to test my ability to see the spirit realm. So we go out into the middle of the woods, start doing the Ouija board there. And I can always tell them what's coming around and what's seeing it. Every once in a while, we get a really big bad one, and it freaks them out. We stop it. Also in high school, so now, before this, I was just drinking and just partying like that. But then all my friends in Flagstaff that I made were all huge stoners and really into weed. So I started smoking weed. And that completely changed my life, and I was like instantly hooked. I started noticing that on weed, it would enhance my spiritual sight. So when I was high on weed, I swear I could hear God really clearly. And I will still stand by that. I'm not imagining it. But I'm not encouraging it either, so don't take that. But when I would notice that it was like the veil between the spirit realm was completely torn down, and I could just see and feel everything spiritually so strongly when I was high. So I kind of really liked it, and I would do it sometimes to get really introspective or like just all the wrong things, but I was just getting addicted to it. I just wanted to be high at 24/7. And then I started noticing how much better sex felt when I was high. So then I was like, oh, he's just really high. And like, it was just a really vicious, just another vice that I started getting. So now it's also me and my friends were addicted to the Ouija board. Started going around doing them on, even in the graveyard. So around NAU, for some reason, there's a graveyard on either side of it, on the east and west side. Super weird, but we would sneak into them at night, hop over the fence and stuff, and go do it in the graveyard. So, and now looking back at the time, I didn't see the correlation, but my mental health was just going to the pits at this time. And it was because I was doing the Ouija board all the time, and just drinking and having sex and smoking weed all the time. And mind you, too, the night attacks that I'm experiencing at night never stopped at any point in my life. They're just getting progressively worse and more consistent, to where at this point in college, I can't go a single night without waking up to being raped. I can't tell you how many times I've been raped by demons. I can't tell you how many times I've woken up to things crawling out of my mirrors, to waking up to being choked, to wake up to things shoving things in my face, vice versa. Like, it's horrific, you know? And it's like, who do you tell about that stuff? Christians don't believe you. They think you're crazy. You tell anyone else, like, they're just going to put me on medications or something. Like, I can't talk to anybody about this. The only people I could talk to about it were the people involved in the occult and witchcraft and the new age and stuff, because they'd talk and they would give me crystals and things that would help for a little bit to like ward off evil and stuff. And it would work for like a night or two. And then more would just come and I'd have to do something else, and I'd have to do something else. And like, it was just like this never ending path. And it was just getting dark. And that's why I started smoking weed so much too, because then I would notice, oh, if I get really, really high before bed, then I don't have dreams or anything. I just sleep through the night. And like, so I started noticing like alcohol didn't do that to me. Alcohol, I would wake up drunk and I would just be surrounded by demons in me or on me, or like just not good. So I was like, okay, like I can't go to sleep drunk. I didn't like that. So, but weed, I was like, oh, like if I go to sleep high, I was like, I'm fine. Like then nothing happened. So that just became another daily habit. All this time too. So then sophomore year comes around. Sophomore year, still involved in all this kind of stuff. Not doing the Ouija board as much anymore. Freshman year, there is a story that I had to explain. So with these same three friends I was telling you about, those two girls and the guy, I'm just going to call them J, C, and K, because I don't want to give their full names. But So J is the guy, C and K are the girls. C and K share a room together in our dorm building. They were, after I told them and stuff, they were like, well, stuff is always weird in our room. Like, we feel like there's something in our dorm room. So they're like, can you come see? And I told them how I can see spirits attached to objects and stuff. So I go there and I see these objects and stuff. And they have me sleep in their room because they start freaking out because it's getting so bad. In their room, I had the most demonic dreams. And in the one dream I had, I remember taking out this black rosary, like, you know, the Catholics pray to. It was like a black rosary, and just feeling the evil on it, seeing all these demons attached to it. And it was in this box that was above C's bed. And so the next morning I woke up and I was like, C, I was like, do you have a box of rosaries above your bed? And she's like, yeah, I collect them. And I was like, oh. And so I was like, can you show me them? And she brings out the exact same box I saw in my dream, opens it. I pull out the exact same one that I saw in my dream. Attached to it, I can see are 3 different demons. There's one that's a little one. It's a demon of self-rejection. Bigger one that looks just like a gargoyle, spirit of depression. Bigger one that looks like a woman in a black, long, flowing cloak. And she has long black hair. Her eyes are just pitch black, no irises, pupils, or anything, just pitch black. And then she flickers, and she's actually a skeleton. And then she flickers back to the woman with long black hair and like a really gaunt, skinny face. And she's a woman, a spirit of suicide. And I find out that both of these girls are dealing with all this stuff. So we're like, okay, what do we do? And C is like, we can't destroy her. And her personality completely changed. And she was like, we're not getting rid of this. Like, you can't. It's a rosary. It's holy. And we're all like, okay, well, we can't keep these. And she's like, yes, we can. She started like, and we're like, C, calm down. And she's like, I need a minute. And then she went into the bathroom. And all 3 of us were like, we have to destroy it. But we're like, what do we do if she doesn't let us? And so we're like, okay, like, what do we do? I was like, I don't know. And like, we're like trying to figure out. And then we hear her mumbling in there. And we're like, see? And she's like, gets quiet then. And we're like, what is it doing? So then we open the door on her and she's glaring in the mirror like this, like at herself. And she's like, talking nonsense. And we're like, okay. And we're like, see? And then she like looks up and looks at us and doesn't say anything. And we're like, are you okay? And she's like, she just doesn't say anything. And we're like, okay, like something's wrong with her. So we start looking up churches around and stuff because we were freaking out. We didn't know what to do. And I tell them I see these demons. We can all feel them and stuff. And they're just like, the girls are crying. The other girls just sobbing and stuff. And like, so me and the guy are like, what do we do? And so like, we're like, and she is like, we're like, well, she won't let us get rid of them or destroy them. So we're like, maybe she'll let us take them because she's Catholic. So we're like, okay, let us take them to the Catholic church. So there's a Catholic church just right off campus of NAU. So like, okay, we asked Chloe this and she was like, okay, that is like, for a moment of clarity, she was like, okay, that'd be fine. We can take them there and they'll know what to do. So we're like, we grab our stuff. We don't have a car or anything. So we're walking on campus. Like, we have to take turns holding the rosaries because we notice whoever's holding them starts getting horrible stomach pains, headaches, and like just like hard of breathing. Like, it's like really affecting us. So we keep trading them off and stuff, but we don't let C hold them because she's like possessed or something. She's like having a hard time walking. She's like stumbling and then she just stops and then like starts throwing up, but then nothing comes out. And then we have to just like push her and stuff. So then we get to the church, the Catholic church. And like, once we get in there, I see the spirit of suicide, like screaming and scolding the other 2 demons. It's like she was in charge and she was mad that we got to this point. So we talked to the church and we're like, we're trying to meet with the Pope or like the priest or whatever. And he finally does. And we talked to him about it. And he's like, yeah, he's like, actually be surprised. He's like, something like this happens at least once a year at NAU. And we're like, really? I was like, okay. So he takes him from us. C, totally fine. He prays over us, sprinkles holy water over us and stuff. Then C is totally fine after that. Same with K after that. So then later after that, like that happened freshman year. So then it was just more leading into me learning about this stuff and how they can attach to objects. So sophomore year, I move into a 4-bedroom apartment with 5 of our other friends. So it's pretty tight, you know. It's like a little 4-bedroom apartment, 2-bath. So one of the guys and the girls, they're dating, so they kind of share a room. One girl gets her own room, another dude gets his own room, and I share a room with my best friend at the time. So we're all living together. Like I said, there's like 4 of us guys and 2 girls, like in our friend group. And sophomore year, I'm still involved in all this stuff. Like, I'm the big partier one, like I'm those, but we all smoke weed all the time. Then sophomore year, so now dating apps exist, which they didn't exist when I was in high school and stuff, or at least if they did, I didn't know about it. So now I'm like, oh, this makes it so much easier to find sex. So in particular at this time, I just got to the point too where I was like, I'm still interested in girls, but I thought guys were just more fun to have sex with, where I thought it was way more fun and more enjoyable, and I thought it was hotter and it was just way easier. So I was just like, oh, like I'll still date girls and stuff, but I'm just gonna hook up exclusively with guys and stuff. So I was on Grindr and I met this dude, and I remember it was like the most beautiful man that I had ever seen. And so I was like, oh, and he asked me on a date, and I was like, and even before that, I had never even considered going on a date with a guy, because I was like, no, like it's just a purely sexual thing. It's just lust. Like it's not anything emotional. Like I'm not gay. And so even though I'm hooking up with guys, like I'm not gay. So I was like, okay, whatever. So, but this guy asked me on a date on this app. I was like, oh, I was like, wow. I was like, it's really beautiful. I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, and I kind of had like this crush. I was like, wow. I was like, okay, well, I was like, I guess if I were to go on a date with a guy, like this would be the one I would want to. So I was like, I agreed to it. I remember I was super nervous to meet up downtown with this dude that I was like, because I was like, oh my gosh, everyone's going to see us and we're on a date. Like all this stuff. I was like freaking out. Then, so we meet up. A super normal guy and stuff, just like me, like the same exact way how I felt about girls and guys, he was the same way, but how I felt about him, he felt about me. And so like we agreed to keep dating, and like, so we went on a few more dates, never did anything sexual. And I remember just being like, that was like shifted everything in my head, because then even growing up, how I grew up, even though I didn't fully believe in the Bible and Jesus and stuff, like in the Christianity, I was still like, oh, like it's probably true, but like it's just like kind of true. It's a good core message. But then I still grew up thinking like homosexuality was just like such a sin and like wrong and stuff. But then with this guy, with my first boyfriend, he became my first boyfriend. We started dating. And I remember I was like, that changed everything, because I was like, oh, like this isn't just sexual. It is like, it to me at the time, it felt really pure, because I was like we didn't do anything sexual for so long. It was like, it was just dating and like so pure. And I hadn't experienced that with like any girl or guys for a long time since I was young. So I was like, wow, I was like, this is so wholesome and stuff. And I was like, this is different. And that changed my worldview on everything. And I was like, well, maybe I am gay then, because then I ended up liking him. I felt like how much I liked him was incomparable to how much any girl that I ever thought I liked before or thought I loved. And I was like, okay, like, maybe I am just gay. And then I started realizing, and then I was freaking out too, because then I was like, great, now I'm going to have to tell my friends and all this stuff. And I was super paranoid, because I was living, like I said, with 3 guys and 2 girls, and they're all my best friends. And I was like, I don't want them to start thinking I'm weird, or like all my guy friends to think I'm like checking them out or like trying to sleep with them or something, because like I wasn't like that. Like, even though I was like so sexual and stuff, I never, like when I saw a girl or a guy as a friend, like it was just that. Like I never saw them as an option. And even because I remember even in high school, in any friend group, when a guy and a girl would start dating and then it caused drama and the whole friend group broke up, and I hated that. So I remember even from a young age, like 15 or 16, deciding I was like, if someone's my friend, they're just my friend. I will never date them or do anything sexual with them. So like anyone, so I'd only look outside of my friend groups for that stuff. So I was really nervous to tell my friends though, because I was, especially that I was sharing a room with one of my best friends, and I was like, bro, I was like freaking out. I was like, none of them are Christian though. But so I was like freaking out still, and I was just like, oh my gosh, I was like, they're gonna think I'm weird, or like they're gonna stop being my friend. So eventually I came out and I told them, because I was like, well, I'm dating this guy now. I was like, they're gonna see me hang out with him all the time. They're gonna know like when he comes over all the time, like, and we're hanging out in my room, like they're gonna like, so I was like, I have to tell them. So I told all my friends. And honestly, I couldn't have asked for better friends, because they were so supportive and stuff, and they like couldn't believe that I'd never told them and all this stuff. And like they were super supportive. I remember like even some of my guy friends like cried and stuff, and I was like really moved, because I was like, wow, like I can't believe my friends actually care about me this much, and like never once made anything weird between any of them. Like friendships still remain the same. Honestly, I feel it brought our friendships like even closer, because now it's like they knew like this other side of me. So that happened. So then now me and this guy are like outwardly dating, and I was like, wow. And I remember at this time in my life feeling more at peace with myself than I'd ever felt in my life. And even going home over the winter break and stuff and seeing all my family for Christmas and everything, I remember I didn't tell them. I was like, I can never tell my family about that I'm dating a guy. I was like, they will lose their minds or something because they're all Christian. And I was like, even then, I remember my mom and dad and my aunts and uncles, they're like, Phoenix, they're like, this is the best I've ever seen you. You just seem so happy and at peace. And in my head, I was like, it's because of him. I was like, it's because of my boyfriend. And I was like, it's because I'm finally accepting who I am. That's how I saw it. So I was like, I'm finally accepting who I am in life. I was like, I'm not running from it, fighting it, and hating myself for it and all this stuff. So even that was just like confirmation. And then I just remember feeling so at peace. And I fell in love with this dude. And I literally will still say to this day that he was my first true love, because he was. And it made me rethink everything. And then I was really questioning religion because I was kind of starting to come back to the Bible. But then that made me realize, like, well, I was like, how is that to be if this is like, if this love and romance and relationship can be so beautiful, like, how is it a sin? Like, I couldn't comprehend it, because to me, every sin made sense. Or like even sex outside of marriage, which I loved. Honestly, that was like, honestly, I loved sex more than anything in the world. And so I was like, even that, I could see why it was a sin, because I was like, yeah, it makes sense. Like, you know, like STDs and like just like causing drama and issues, and you're going to get in a relationship purely because of that, and there's not going to be any emotional there. And when you try to build a real relationship, like, so it's obvious. Stealing, obviously don't steal, obviously don't cheat. Like, you know, every sin makes sense, but to me, it didn't make sense. And I was like, this one doesn't affect anybody else. I was like, how does it affect anybody else because I want to be with a man instead of a woman? And I was like, even in getting my own head, I was like, why is it such a thing in our world where it's so looked down upon, even more than like any other sin? And then it made me hate Christians even more, because so many Christians, I felt like, were such hypocrites, where they would be divorced 3 times and then, oh, but that's fine, or oh, it just didn't work out, but then, oh, you're gay, that's an abomination, you're disgusting, you know, and like all this disgusting stuff. So it kind of pushed me away from Christianity even more at that point. So I'm still just searching, and I'm getting like really into crystals and like all this new age stuff. I get really into astral projecting. I start astral projecting all the time because I think it's cool. I'm meeting all these entities that are showing me these things and other realms and stuff, and about the spirit realm. And I think I'm becoming like this, like a god, or like this high functioning warlock or something. That's how they get you. These demons do. So anyway, so all this is going on. Then my boyfriend, he was a couple years older than me. So I was a sophomore in college at this point when we met, started dating. He was like, he had graduated the previous year. So he was just like having a year just working in Flagstaff like after. And so he was planning on moving back to Phoenix. And like, we didn't talk about it, but I just kind of assumed like, oh, like, we'll just like do long distance and stuff. Because I thought we were in love. I thought it was like this picture perfect, whatever. And then it came up because of Valentine's Day. I had all this stuff planned for Valentine's Day, and then I found out he was going to be gone or busy or something. And I was like, oh, like, he doesn't even care. Like, I thought this was the first Valentine's Day I had ever been dating someone and stuff. So I was like, kind of excited for it and stuff. And I was like, oh, like, I guess this guy doesn't even care. So then after that, we had like this long talk, and we realized that like, he saw it kind of as just like a fun experiment to date a guy, because he had never dated a guy, and he just thought it would be cool, and thought I was really hot. So he thought it would just be like, whatever. And he didn't actually like me how I liked him. So then I was like, okay. So we broke up, ended it, utterly destroyed. I had never been that sad at any points in my life. And I remember at that point realizing, I was like, oh my gosh, this is what all these heartbreaking songs are about. I was like, this is the worst feeling in the world. And I was just like spiraling, missed class for a week, wasn't eating anything, was just literally just getting high all day and laying in bed, just sobbing and crying. Honestly, it sounds pathetic, but I was really sad. And because like this guy, I was like, oh, I came out for him and like all this stupid stuff. So I was just like really upset. All my friends knew I was upset. They kept trying to bring me food and all this stuff. Like, it was really sweet. But like, then, so at this point, then things started got dark again. So at this point now, I was, like I said, I was getting really into astral projecting. So my boyfriend broke up with me. So I was super depressed, like more depressed than I've ever been in my life. I stopped going to class for a week. So then finally after a week, I was like, I need to go to class. I was in school for marketing at this point. So I go to class. I'm behind in every class. Each class I go to, I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, in that 1 week, I'd missed so much, and I was like freaking out and panicking. So then I would just like, but instead I would just like, so then I went to the gym, and I was just like, okay, I'm just going to work out about it. And so I started like doing that, and that started becoming another fixation. Then, so I started doing that and just getting high. And then every day I would just go to class and then get really stressed out, leave class early, go to the gym and just work out instead and skip all my other classes. Till eventually it got to the point where I just stopped going to class, and I failed every single class that semester because it got to the point where I was like, I'm so far behind. And I was like, I already had been kind of debating changing my major at that point, but I was like, bro, like, I don't know what to do. Like, I hate this. I'm so far behind now. And now it's too late in the semester because it was like October, November. I was like, it's too late for me to like change the majors right now in the year and stuff. No, actually, this was in February. Yeah, because it was after Valentine's Day where we broke up. So it would have been like end of the second semester, you know, the spring semester. So I was just like, well, whatever. So like, stopped going to class and everything, and like just failed all my classes, terrified to tell my parents when I came home for spring break because I was living on campus and stuff. And I was like, so I remember at dinner one time, I was like, hey, so guess what? And they're like, what? And I was like, failed all my classes this semester. And they literally laughed. They're like, ha. Like, and then I was like, no, I was like being serious. And they're like, oh, look, good one, Phoenix and stuff. Because before that point, like I literally had scholarships for my good grades. Like I was an A student. Like I never even had to try. Like it was just like really something that came easily to me. So I was just like, no. And I kept telling them, I was like, no. And they didn't believe me. And I was like, no. And I literally had to pull it up and show them. And I remember they were just like, what happened and stuff. And then they were just like so sad and disappointed. And like, they were just like so annoyed. And like, so in order to not lose my scholarship, we had to like, so I lost all my scholarships actually. So, and then I was screwed, and like, I just wanted to drop out at that point. I was like, school's stupid. Like, I just wanted to be a travel influencer, and like, I was going to move to Bali. I was literally looking up houses in Bali, and I was like, I'm going to move to Bali and become like a travel influencer and just like make money that way. I don't need school like all these people do without. And like, my parents were just begging me to stay in school and stuff. And so finally I was like, okay, like, but only if I'm in classes I'm interested in. So then started a period. And so, so then we also like, I wrote the dean of the admissions or whatever. And like my dad, since he's a doctor, he wrote a doctor's note saying I was like clinically depressed and all this stuff. And like, so I got half of my scholarships back because of that. So like they were able to give me, because they could see how I was doing really well, and then it just dropped off. So, and I was really depressed. So like I got it half back because of my mental health. So they gave me half of it back, and then I had to take out loans for like the other half. So anyway, so I convinced myself to stay in school, but only if I'm in classes I'm interested in. So I keep changing major, like every other day I keep changing and stuff. And then finally I was like, well, the only classes I was ever interested in were my religious studies classes. And I was like, and it was at this point in my life where I'm still like trying to figure out the truth about what is what spiritually. So I was like, well, I'm just going to get my major in religious studies. You can't do that. So I got it in comparative cultural studies with an emphasis in religious studies. Because then I was like, oh, I'll get my bachelor's in this, and then I'll get my master's in archaeology and be an archaeologist with that as my bachelor's. That was like my whole plan. So now going into junior year, now I'm like openly bisexual, gay, whatever. I don't know. I hated labels even back then because I was like, it's just stupid. I was like, I just like who I like. I was like, sometimes I like girls, sometimes I like guys. I just like whoever I think is hot. So even then, I remember one time like my parents visiting me up in Flagstaff. So now like after my ex broke up with me, I could tell you there's a whole other story. I don't know if that's relevant. Sorry, I'm just trying to.
You can try to do what.
I know. I just
feel like, well, like, yeah, just ask please.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like I don't need to share that yet. So, okay. So then, I think it was sophomore or junior year. Like, so then after me and my first boyfriend broke up, after that, honestly, I went on a few dates with girls, but it just didn't go anywhere. Like I kind of like lost interest in women after that. And especially because I felt like then I was just like, oh, it's just so much more. I guess like I just felt like more of a emotional connection to guys then once I had like developed it than I did to women. And even like physical attraction, it was more often that I would see a guy that I thought was attractive than it was a woman. But so at that point, I remember one time then my parents come and visit me in Flagstaff, and they're asking me if I was seeing anybody, and they're like, I was like, no, like I'm single and stuff like that. And then they're asking, they're like, so still into guys and girls and stuff. And I remember I like telling them, yeah. And they were like, where they were saying, and then like they were saying, well, like they don't agree with it because they're still Bible and Jesus, obviously, and devoted followers, but that they're not gonna like, that they don't want me to ever feel like I can't still talk to them, or that they're ever gonna disown me or anything like that. So even that was like really confirming for me, even where I was like, okay, because that was like a huge weight where I was like scared to even tell my parents. It was like, well, what about if I do come home with a guy, or I end up, I thought marrying a guy and stuff, and I was like, well, then they're never going to accept me and stuff like that. So it was cool to even have them be there where it's like, well, we don't agree with it, but they're not, which I think is honestly how a lot of Christians should behave towards it, where it's like, yeah, you don't agree with it, but you just kicking your kids out of your life and stuff isn't going to help anyone. That just makes the situation so much worse, you know? So anyway, so now my family knows, like pretty much everybody knows. And then, because then I become more open about dating guys. And so then honestly, I have quite a few boyfriends. Don't need to go into all of them, but date quite a few different guys. Trying to think of where the next pivotal like moment is. So all this time as well, actually. So then in school, I'm really studying all these different religions and stuff, and I really just start realizing you can disprove every religion except the Bible. You can disprove any religious text but the Bible. Like I told you, like I literally disproved Islam in a day. Like even myself as a college student, I was a freshman when I did that, and I looked into the Quran and I disproved it archaeologically and historically myself. Like it's not hard to do if you're actually trying to do things objectively. And that's what I was doing. That was my intention behind everything. And it was almost like Christianity was the last resort, because I was like, I didn't want it to be true, because I was like, well, if the Bible's true and stuff, then I can't live how I want to live, honestly. And so I was trying so hard to disprove it. And that's kind of why I even got my degree in that, in religious studies, because I was like, I wanted an objective scientific worldview of every religion. It just really solidified it to me even more how real the Bible is. And during that time too, I started finding all these Christian podcasts and stuff, and they were talking about all these spiritual, supernatural stuff and how they fit in biblically. And I started making me view the Bible completely differently. I started reading the Bible myself, and I was like, wow, this stuff is in the Bible. Christians just don't talk about it. And it was like all these experiences that I have and stuff where it's like, it is in the Bible. Christians just have these ideas in their head that they just perpetrate, or they hear from someone and then it just catches on, and they don't have no one actually goes to the word themselves about it. And it really started opening up my eyes to a lot, where then I was like, okay, like I think the Bible is true, but I didn't still, honestly, I was hung up on the whole gay thing. So I was like, okay, well, I just don't think that it's 100% scripture, because I was like, I really just don't think that God cares that I'm with men, or like would want to date a guy, or like could marry a guy. So then I really started just exploring religion a little bit more. And I started realizing too, another thing I will say is I explored and went into every single religious kind of building or temple, every single kind. I've attended a service of everything, Jewish service, I've attended Catholic service, I've attended an Islam mosque, even after I disproved it. I've attended Buddhist temples, I've been to Hindu temples, I've been to like literally everything. And it's all demons. It's all filled with demons in every single one of them, except for Christian churches. Not every Christian church, but some Christian churches are the only places, that religious buildings, that I see angels in. And they are the only ones that I see any good, positive angels, like spirits in. Every other one has demons in it. Every single one. The only people that I see angels around or with are Christians. Not any non-Christians, not Muslims, not Hindus. They just have a bunch of demons following them, honestly. And I couldn't deny it anymore. It just got to the point where it was just so obvious in my life. And I was just like, okay, God, like making it clear, like you have to be Christian. Like it's just the way it is. And I just felt like I would be a fool to deny it, because I was like, the fact that I've searched and scoured spiritually, physically, archaeologically, historically, everything, like you can't disprove it. And another thing that really got me too, honestly, and I know a lot of Christians that have come back to it this way, where I started getting really into conspiracies, because getting into the occult and all this dark stuff, and I dated one of my ex-boyfriends. He later revealed to me that he was in the Illuminati. dark stuff. That's a whole other story. Don't really feel like it's relevant to this story, and it would detract from it. But maybe I'll share that one day. But he was very demonically oppressed, witch, Satanist, reptilian. He was something. I watched his eyes slits change in front of my very eyes several times. He would tell me all this stuff that's going on. I started meeting all these people, honestly, through hookups. I met all these like guys that were like C-list celebrities, B-list celebrities that are involved in these like circles and stuff. And it started proving all these conspiracies to me about all these things. And I started going to these parties sometimes with like these people, or like not any like big celebrity parties and stuff, but like just with people that are in these worlds that confirmed and proved to me so many different things, conspiracies, that then I was like, well, if that's true, then this must be true. And then you start unraveling this thread. Anyone, you can do it. Like literally look into 9/11. That's the first most obvious one. Just look into the details of it. It's not, it's crazy. Then once you undo that one, then you realize, oh, well, if they're lying about that, then they're lying about this. If that's real, then it's like you just keep pulling back. And there's a saying in the conspiracy community that all rabbit holes lead to Jesus. Because once you realize what's going on, and the fact of the matter is that the world is fallen. The Bible tells us that. The God of this world is Satan. The Bible tells us that. The governments of the world are not our friend, they are our enemy. The Bible tells us that. Whether you get into conspiracies or not and know the truth and just how dark the world really is, isn't necessary for everybody, but that's ultimately what really brought me back to Jesus as well, because I was like, bro, everything is against Jesus. It's the whole world, all these false religions, everything is against Jesus. Every religion incorporates Jesus in some way. Buddhists say he was another enlightened Buddha. The Muslims say that he was another prophet, second only to Muhammad. The Jews say he was a false prophet. Everybody talks about the New Agers. They talk about how he was an enlightened teacher. Even Hindus talk about how he was an enlightened teacher, where every single religion has to include him because he is the way, the truth, and the life. No other person, no other religious figure, no other spiritual figure says that I'm the way, the truth, and the life. Only Jesus says that. And that's why every single other religion has to incorporate him. And that's what I came to realize, and I just came to believe, where it's like you can't deny it. You look objectively. I challenge people to objectively look into every religion, try to disprove them. You can disprove them all, but the Bible, the more you try to disprove it, the more you'll realize it's proven true and true again. So now, having this understanding and everything, my senior year of high school, I wasn't really partying anymore. I outgrew that kind of. I was still having sex all the time. It was really an addiction. And like I said, it wasn't really a porn addiction. I didn't struggle with that. It was just the actual sex. I could not stop it. It was like, and I knew it was a problem, but I didn't have the shame behind it anymore, because ever since I accepted myself, and then I started I think it was sounds bad, but it's once I started only going for people that I was actually attracted to and not just doing things out of desperation and stuff, I was like, oh, this is just so fun and stuff. And so it just was really an addiction that I just could not seem to break. Then I would date one guy for a while and then move on, break up, move on, do on next. It was just a never ending cycle. That and weed. And so then finally too, I started seeing the problems with weed, and I was like, well, this is just causing me to be lazy and all these issues. So I started doing that. So then I started praying a lot, and because I was really coming back to God, and I was accepting okay, I accept Jesus as my Savior again. I think it was my junior, senior year of college, where I was and I say back again because I accepted Jesus into my life as my Savior as a very young child, led with my parents and stuff, But that's, like I said, I told you guys how I grew away from it. So now I was okay, God, I want to come back to you. And I remember another thing, the only thing that would ever get my night terrors to stop, and the sleep paralysis and being raped at night and things choking me and stuff, was the name of Jesus. Even when I was so deep and hated Jesus, and I wanted nothing to do with him, I was trying to disprove him. I was deeply involved with the Ouija board and all these other dark satanic practices, astral projecting every night and stuff. When I was overwhelmed and consumed by the darkness, if I would call out the name of Jesus, it would stop. All of it. Every single time. And it really I get serious thinking about it right now, about how much he still cares about each and every one of us, even when I was living in so much rebellion against him. And it's even though I knew I could see the spirit realm and stuff, and I still doubted his existence and still was trying to prove him wrong. And I just say that to everyone because people don't realize how forgiving he is, and how a verse that he just made really stand out to me and that he keeps putting in my mind lately is the verse where he says there is no condemnation in Christ. Because that's the thing with Jesus Christ, is that he doesn't condemn. He corrects, and he points out what you're doing is wrong and when you're doing it wrong, but he doesn't condemn. That's human. That's what humans do. That's what Satan does to us. And so something else I really learned about that in developing my relationship, but I still had all this church hurt, and I didn't want to join a church and stuff. And I was like, I'm just going to focus on my own personal relationship with God. And I started listening to all these other podcasts and all these other Christian teachers and stuff I found online and stuff that talk about all these spiritual things and stuff. That was like really, so I was developing this relationship, but I still didn't want to give up sex, honestly. That was my last vice. I was like, I love sex too much, God. I was like, I can't do it. So I'd literally tell him that in my prayers. I was like, God, I'll give up everything for you but sex. I was like, I can't do it. So that's just like another thing going in my past. I give up smoking weed. I quit doing everything else in my life, like senior year even. And but then I started praying. I was like, okay, God, like I'm finishing college here. After I graduated college, I ended up, since I failed that semester and I changed my major so many times after, I ended up having to do an extra semester. So I graduated in winter of 2021 instead of spring of 2021 like I was supposed to. So then I stayed up there another 6 months just working and saving up, trying to figure out what I wanted to do after. And I remember praying and asking God like all the time, like, God, what do you want me to do? Clear as day. He would tell me, you need to start a business helping people get rid of demons and start posting your experiences on social media. And I was like, no. I was like, I'm not doing that. I was like, I don't want to do that. And he would literally tell me, anytime I asked him, he would tell me that exact message. You need to start a business helping people get rid of demons and start posting your experiences on TikTok. And I was like, I don't want to do that. I was like, that sounds awful. I was like, I'm not going to be some Christian influencer. I was like, that's so cringy. I was like, so at this point, like I come back to him and stuff, but I still like hated Christianity. I hated it. It's like still so gross, like made me just like sick to my stomach. Like I didn't want to be associated with that and stuff. I was like, I want you, God. I just want you. And I want to please you and stuff. But I was like, I can't do that. And so then I was like, well, and all my friends were like, you should just be a personal trainer, because I got super into the gym and like working out was like the highlight of my day every day. And I was like, that would be easy. So got certified to be a personal trainer, started a personal training business down in Scottsdale. Then I was doing that for a couple of years. During that time, I really was still wrestling with God about liking men. And so I prayed and I was asking God, I was like, okay, God, like if man being together with another man is so wrong, you have to show me how. You have to show me like why it doesn't work, because otherwise I feel like it's just going to be this part of myself that just like, I can't reconcile. Like I can't reconcile in my brain and tell myself and make myself believe that it's a sin. I just can't do it. Like I literally could not. And so it was something I really struggled with. I was like, okay, God, so if you really have this, like you got to tell me. And anytime I would pray and people ask me like, well, if you hear him so clearly, why not just ask him? And I would ask him all the time. I was like, God, is it okay for me to be dating this guy? Or is it okay for me to date men or like men? And he would always tell me the same thing. He'd always just tell me, it doesn't matter, just seek me. It doesn't matter, just seek me. Every single time. And I was like, God, I just want a clear answer though. Like, tell me, is it right or wrong? He's like, it doesn't matter, just seek me. So that's what I did. Not completely though, because then I still didn't want to start a business helping people get rid of demons, and I didn't want to post my experiences on TikTok. So I was like, okay. So then I met this other guy, my other ex, and me and him, so before this, mind you, all my relationships had never been longer than 3 months. I'd never dated anyone, man or woman, more than 3 months. And so I feel like I'd never really had like a real relationship. So this guy that me and him started dating, he didn't want to have sex right away and stuff. And I remember, it sounds stupid, but like that was such a big thing, because I was like, whoa, like, oh my gosh, it's like just emotional. Like he doesn't want just sex and stuff. So like then we started dating. We ended up dating for over 15 months. And this was like how it met and stuff. I thought it was from God. Like maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. I'm not going to say. But I felt like I was like, oh my gosh, this is from God. Like he's the one. I thought he was the one. Like I felt like he was just everything I'd ever wanted in a person, man or woman. Because that's why then I decided, God, I was like, I don't really care who I end up with, a man or a woman. Like, I just have all these traits that I want in a partner. And so that's why I told God. And I just thought it was like, and that's the thing, I was like never against women or dating women. I just saw it as unlikely, where it was like just not nearly as common that I would even be attracted to a woman. So then I met this guy, and like it started so wholesome and everything, and we started dating. And like up to this point too, around my family and stuff, I would be like, oh yeah, like homosexuality is wrong. Like I know it's a struggle, even though I didn't believe it. But so with this one, I was like, no, like he's the one. And so I told my family, I was like, I don't believe it's wrong and stuff. And that caused like a whole kind of thing. But my family still was really accepting. They never once like kicked me out or like disowned me or anything like that. Some of them had a hard time with it, I will admit, but they still accepted me, and they never once stopped loving me or letting me be part of the family, honestly. And that was huge for him as well, my boyfriend, because he knew that they were Christian, and he had this horrible view of Christians. He was Jewish. His family was Jewish, and so he was not religious, spiritual at all. So that kind of caused a lot of issues in our relationship. And our relationship then kept going. I started seeing more and more all these things that I thought weren't important in relationships, about like really like agreeing on religion, agreeing on politics, agreeing on all this stuff. You think you overlook it and you think it's not important. Well, and this relationship really opened my eyes, and it made us both realize, okay, maybe this stuff is kind of important in a partner, to agree on this stuff. It started causing a lot of issues. So it was like cracks in the foundation and stuff, and then it just kept getting slowly worse and worse, until like we were both just kind of unhappy, where it was like anything that I enjoyed and liked to do, he didn't, and anything he liked and enjoyed to do was like I didn't. So I felt like we just both felt like we were just constantly compromising for each other, where we liked each other and we liked spending time together, but not doing the things that each other liked and stuff. So it was just like a very not good relationship, and it just kept getting more and more kind of toxic. And so eventually, and at this time too, I'm personal training, right? I'm trying to be a personal trainer. My goal is like to have my own gym and stuff. And anytime I pray for guidance or anything, God is just like, you need to quit this and start posting your experiences on TikTok and start helping people get rid of demons full time. And I was like, anytime, like, it was just like he was constantly telling me this, and I was just like, no, like, stop telling me that. Like, I don't want to do that. And so then finally our relationship with my ex is just falling apart, and I really realized I was like, if I were to end up with a man, he is the man I'd want to be with. Like, despite all of our differences and stuff, I was like, I respected him and liked him so much, and every trait that he had, I was like, this is who I'd want. And I just remember my prayer to God asking me, like, you have to show me why it doesn't work. And I started seeing like how it just wasn't going to work. And so eventually, he was from New York, from Long Island, which I went there a few times with him and stuff, or one time, and it just wasn't going to work. And he had to move for work and stuff. So we broke up, and he wanted me to move with him, and I just couldn't do it. I knew, even as much as I was disobeying and living in rebellion, I still knew that I was where God wanted me, in Scottsdale, where I was training and stuff. But I knew deep in my pit, God was like, you cannot leave Scottsdale. Like, you cannot leave Arizona. Like, I knew that if I were to leave and move out of Arizona for this guy, I would be completely out of God's will. And I felt like I was going to lose him forever. And I remember feeling that choice, and I was like, I have to choose God. Like, I have to, because I know myself and I will never feel fulfilled if I don't do this. So we broke up. He moved back to Long Island. Another low point in my life, where I was just, from personal training too, I never made any money from that. Like, I was barely made enough money from it to pay my bills. And then everything extra, I was just putting on credit cards. I was going into this massive credit card debt. And especially in this relationship, because my ex was very bougie, and we would like to go to really nice restaurants, do all these things, and I would just put it on my credit card. And so I was getting really into debt. And so when we broke up, I had to have, before that, I'd already had to move back in my parents because I couldn't afford to live on my own. So I'm living with my parents. Then which I'm eternally grateful for them for, so I don't want to make it sound bad like I'm ungrateful for that or anything, but you know, like, just as a man, after you've moved out, as an adult, after you've moved out and lived on your own for so many years, and then you have to move back in, it just is like this feeling in yourself where you're just like it just, Like, no matter how we phrase it or try to warp it and stuff, it's just like some part of me just always feels like I've lost or I failed or something, you know. And even that, it's nothing on my parents or anything. Like, we have a great relationship and stuff, but like it's just how I felt. And so after me and my ex broke up, I'm doing that because I was basically living with him. I was at his house 24/7. I wasn't even at my parents ever. So then I was like, had no money, was in crippling debt, like really sad because I was just like, well, if I'm not going to be with him, I don't want to be with any man. Then I was just like, it was just like a really sad time. And I was like, my personal training was just not working out. It was so stressful. I was posting on social media every day, trying to become a fitness influencer. I've been posting almost 3 years and I barely had over 1,000 followers on TikTok and stuff. This comes in reference later. So I was just like, okay, at this point, this was in April of 2024. So I was like, okay, God, my life sucks. I was like, I've been trying to do it my own way. I've been listening to you. You've been telling me clearly what to do. I haven't been listening to you. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to try it your way. I'll do anything, whatever it is you want to do. I'm going to, for the full time in my life, I'm going to just fully surrender to you. I'll give you full control of driving wheel. And I was like, what do you want me to do? He's like, start a TikTok, start posting your spiritual experiences, and you're going to start another website, like with details about how to help people get rid of spirits and demonic affliction. I was like, okay. So I did it. I literally made this whole other website, like started this. I kept it under the same LLC as like my personal training and stuff. So I was like, because I knew I had this feeling deep down even then. One day I knew it was going to overtake my personal training. So I was like, well, I'll just keep it with this LLC I already have. Started posting my experiences on TikTok, but I was like, okay, God, but I'm not showing my face on TikTok. So I was like, I'll post my stories, but I'm not showing my face. So I literally just took like screenshots of pictures and would put words on it and like captions. And like, I was like, this is not going to blow up. No one's going to stop and read these on TikTok. TikTok is like all short videos. And so, but sure enough, within a week of posting, I gained over 10,000 followers on TikTok. And I was like, okay, this is God. I started getting people all over the world DMing me, asking me like, Phoenix, like, oh, do you do deliverances over Zoom and stuff? And I was like, no, I don't. Sorry. And because at that point in time, after like college and I was giving myself back to God, I'm working as a personal trainer and stuff. I just drive and I'm listening to podcasts all the time, Christian podcasts. And I remember one podcast I was listening to of my favorite podcast, The Confessionals. There was a guest on there that he was a deliverance minister. And he specifically was talking about how he helps Christians get rid of spirits attached to them. And I remember even at that moment, I was like, I used to be one of those Christians where I was like, Christians can't have demons on them. That's ridiculous. I was like, we have God in us and the Holy Spirit. Like, it doesn't work. And I remember even thinking that then. And I was literally going to turn off the podcast. And then I heard God clearly say in my mind, say, okay, then say the prayer he just said to pray. And I was like, okay. So I was like, okay, God, like, and I was doing it literally so blasphemously sarcastic like that. And I was like, okay, God, like, show me any spirits or deities attached to me. And then I felt all these things stir inside me. And I was like, and I like literally freaked out. So I like pulled over the side of the road and I was like, okay. So I literally like, was like pulled over. I was on the highway. So I got off on an exit, pulled over somewhere I could park. And I was like, okay. I was like, okay, now God, I was like, I was scared. I was like, I could feel these things in me like moving. And I remember seeing like my chest move and stuff. And I was like, I was just like horrified because I was like, what is this inside of me? And I was like, mind you, before this, leading up my entire life, I had been just a ball of anxiety. Like, I was probably the most anxious person. Like, I was just stressed about everything. Like, I think it stemmed from all the stuff of like suppressing myself, like I was talking about earlier, and just like everyone always thinking I'm gay and stuff, and then not wanting that, and then all the stuff happening to me as a kid and feeling nervous around guys and stuff, where it was like I was just always like anxious, like always like freaking out, and it's like a million thoughts always going on in my mind. Like, my mind was never silent. Like, and that's part of the reason I was throwing up all the time, because of my anxiousness, and I knew that. Where that's why, like, when I started going to counseling and stuff, it helped a little bit, but like I was still just always anxious, and like it would get to the point where I'd feel the food get stuck and I'd have to go make myself throw up, or like sometimes I would just throw up normally, but I kind of kept that hidden from all my friends and family and stuff. So anyway, so during this time, when I pulled over in my car and I started praying this, God shows me that there's all these spirits in me, but the head of all of them is the spirit of pride. And I've had a lot of other encounters with the spirit leading up to this, but it's a whole other thing. So I share a lot about it on my social media. But so he reveals himself to me as Apollo, the god Apollo. So he was like, pride. And I remember being confused. He was like, pride? I was like, I don't struggle with pride. Because honestly, I just hated myself. And like, I went through a period of time where I literally couldn't, in high school and stuff, like, and even college sometimes, where I could not look at myself in the mirror because I just did not like who I was so much. Like, I just hated myself. So to me, I was like, pride. I was like, that seems kind of counterproductive. I was like, sure, sometimes I'm prideful, but it's like a cover up or a mask. And God's like, bingo. And I was like, oh, I guess pride is just like a cover up for my self-rejection and stuff that I have. So I prayed and asked God to forgive me for this pride. And instantly, like in the spirit, I was watching it happen. But then I was like, also physically, I could feel it was almost like, I don't know, the best way I can describe it is like if there was like a massive wooden stake inside of my torso. It was just like lifted up out of me. And I was like, and I could feel Apollo like roaring. And then I saw him in front of my car, just like in his full glory, like with these fiery wings, his lion head just roaring at me and his mane on fire and his eyes just like this fiery. And he's like holding out his fiery sword and he's like flexing. He's like just roaring and all these demons like pouring out of me and stuff. And I was just like, oh my gosh. And like watching this, and then they all just, and then it just flies away and they all fly away. And then it was just silent. And I remember I felt so empty, but like in a good way. It was like I felt hollow. And I was like, and I remember my mind was just silent. Like it had never been a single time in my life. And I was just like, whoa. And I was like, I remember asking, I was like, out loud, I was like, God, is this? And I felt God hear me so clearly, but so peace. And it was just like this peace washed over me. He's like, this is how you're supposed to feel all the time. This is the peace that only I can bring. And I remember being like, oh my gosh. And it was like all these things were clicking. I was like, how many of my own thoughts and emotions that I've had my whole life weren't even mine, you know? And I was like, oh my gosh. And this like changed everything. And I was like, I remember just driving and just being elated. And I just started literally like singing in tongues and stuff because I was like just so filled with the Holy Spirit. And I was like, I felt free. And I was like, I didn't even realize how much bondage I'd been living in my whole life. And it was just insane. And so after that, that's when I started still doing personal training, and then I ended up meeting my ex and stuff. So I was aware now about spirits, how they could attach to people. So then I started helping family members and close friends get rid of spiritual attachment. I started realizing I could see spirits in people because they weren't around them. So that's why I thought spirits couldn't attach to people. They were inside of them. So I started noticing that if I was touching someone, I could see all the spirits inside them. So then that's why when I started posting on these TikTok, and I started getting people from all over the world DMing me like, hey, do you do deliverances over Zoom? I was telling them all, no, sorry, like I can only do it in person. And I kept feeling like God say, stop saying that. Yes, you can. And I remember one time with one lady in Florida, he was like specifically like, tell her yes. And I was like, God, I don't know what. And he's like, just tell her yes. So I was like, okay. So I was like, tell her. I was like, yeah, sure. I was like, you want to set up a Zoom? And she was like, yes, please. And she was like telling me all the stuff she deals with and all this stuff. So I was like, so then we scheduled this time and I was like freaking out. I was like, bro, I don't know what to do here. I was like, okay. And before this too, mind you, I went through myself and I got rid of like lust, demons of lust and all this stuff, like all these other things I dealt with. So then in this session with her, I was like, God, I don't know what to do. And he's like, just pray and ask me. I was like, okay. So I see this woman on Zoom and I'm like, I told her, I was like, I've never done this before. I was like, I have no idea how this is going to go. Like, I don't know what to expect. She's like, okay. So she's like, whatever will help. I'm just suffering really bad. So I started praying. I was like, okay, God, please, like, can you show me in the name of Christ Yeshua, any spirits, demons, anything that's attached to or affecting her in any way, shape, or form? And then all of a sudden I'm seeing, like, it's like I go in the spirit inside of her and I'm seeing all this stuff. And I'm like, oh. And then I call it out by when I see it, I just know its name. I can see what it's a spirit of. So I call it out, rebuke it, it's gone. You keep doing that until nothing's left. She's completely free. I was like, bro, this lady's in Florida. I'm in Arizona. I was like, whoa. And so that completely changed my whole perspective on that. And so then I started offering it and I changed my website and stuff to do online deliverance because then I started getting more people from online than in person than I was in Arizona. So I was like, okay. So then I started getting all these people and I started scheduling them. And then eventually got to the point where I was getting more of these people scheduling this stuff than I was my personal training. And then I was like, and God kept telling me, you need to do it full time. And like, you need to charge more so you can do it full time. But I felt weird about charging people for this and stuff. Cause I was like, God, I was like, it's not in the Bible. But then he showed me it is in the Bible. In 1 Corinthians chapter 9, there's a whole passage where Paul goes on a rant about how it's more than acceptable to charge people in exchange for spiritual teachings and all this stuff. And I was like, oh. So then I was like, okay. So then I started doing all this stuff. And I was like, now I had all this clarification from God and all this stuff. Then I had all these encounters. Some stories I've shared on my social media with like pastors where they would tell me like deliverance is something to be done only in groups, led by a pastor, not to be done by themselves, and like all this stuff. And I just was like really for growing in my faith with God, though, because he was showing me like that's not biblical. And I would find passages in the Bible where it's like, no, Jesus tells all of his disciples that they will all go cast out demons. That's like a symptom of being a believer of Christ. It's something we're all called to do. You know, it doesn't say something like only pastors. Like that's nowhere in the Bible. And then I was like, with my gift and ability, it just makes it so easy for me to see exactly what a person is dealing with. So we know exactly like what to go in there, rip it out, and just like toss it out, you know, where it's like, it's not like I don't even talk to them. Like even most deliverance ministries, they're talking to the demons and asking the demons to tell them what they are, where I don't even do that. I just ask the Holy Spirit and the Holy Spirit shows me. So I was like realizing, I was like, I can help people on such a deeper level than all these other people, you know? And so I started focusing on it more. And it was once I started doing that, honestly, it's just so much more. There is nothing like it for me where when I help someone with deliverance, getting rid of the demons out of them, it is like there's no other feeling than I just know I'm doing exactly as I was created to do. So it's like I just knew it. And as soon as I did it, I was like, I got to stop personal training. And I was like, God, you're right. I have to do this full time. I will never be fulfilled in life if I don't, because it's like, that's just what you designed. Like, that's what I'm your tool to do. And so I was like, okay. So I eventually, as of last year, and so leading up to this too, God had been telling me like randomly, like he'd be like, you need to go to Indonesia. And I was like, what? Like Indonesia? I was like, what? He told me this shortly after me and my ex broke up. And I was like, God, Indonesia? I was like, what is, I was like, I'm not going to Indonesia. And he kept telling me that. And I was like, okay, what? But like, bro, I was like, and then I got to, I was like, God, I was like, I don't even have money. I was like, I'm still living at this point I did have my own apartment. So this is funny too. So my life completely started to change once I fully surrendered everything to him. I was able to move out and I got my own apartment in Scottsdale right next to the gym I was training at. So I didn't have to constantly drive super far and everything. I was getting more fulfilled. I wasn't dealing with like, I delivered myself. So I wasn't dealing with all this like unnecessary sins and like all these like mental struggles and all this anxiety and depression I had been dealing with for so long. I was just like happier. Like everyone could tell I looked healthier. I had lost all this weight that I had gained in my relationship with my ex. Like everything was just going really well. And then God kept telling me though, still like, you need to go to Indonesia. I was like, but like, I don't have money to go to Indonesia. I was like, I don't have time, like as a personal trainer. He's like, no, you're going to quit personal training. He's like, September is going to be the last month you're going to do personal training. And I was like, okay. So I was like, at this point, I was like, okay, you know what, God, you're still the boss. I'm going to do it. I'm going to listen to you. I'm sick of listening to myself. So I was like, I asked him about anything. I was like, God, where do you want me to eat today? Whatever restaurants he tells me to go to, I'll go there. God, do you want me to make coffee at home or should I go get it? Oh, you should go get it at this coffee shop and get this drink. I was like, okay. I literally ask him for everything. I don't do anything outside of my own anymore because it doesn't work. So at this point in time though, I realized all this stuff about like homosexuality and everything, but like even that, but I still have a hard time giving up sex, I'll be honest. And that was still my biggest struggle. So even when I was doing deliverance, I felt like a fraud because then I was like, I was helping all these people with these things. And then I would still go and hook up with people after doing deliverance sessions all day and stuff. And I was like, bro, I can't be doing this. Like, I was like, I can't, like, especially like on the level of these demons that are afflicting people that I get rid of. I was like, these are big, high level demons, you know, like I was going up against Lucifer sometimes and I was going up against Satan sometimes and like all these the Queen of Heaven, like all these big, high-ranking members in the kingdom of darkness. I was like, bro, they're looking for a crack in my life and I'm opening up the door for them to come and attack me. So I was dealing with all these spiritual attacks because I couldn't give up sex. And finally, and I was at the point though where I knew it was wrong. I knew I had to give it up, but I just couldn't. It was literally an addiction. And this is something that Christians don't talk about, you know, because you tell people I'm a sex addict and they're like, oh yeah, me too. And every other guy, like, it's like stupid. And you're like, no, you don't understand, dude. Like, it's an addiction. Like the amount of people I've been with, like, it's just like the amount of times that I would lie to my family, to my friends, to cancel to go have sex with someone. The amount of times I would call out of work to go have sex, you know, like there was nothing I wouldn't be willing to do to go have sex. Like it would literally ran and controlled my life. Like I couldn't go without it. Like it was just like, like just how people talk about drugs, like that was like, I quit drinking, no problem. Like drinking was never really an issue for me though, honestly. As much as I liked partying and getting drunk, it wasn't like an addiction. But then weed was really, that was an addiction for me. And but once I quit weed, like I was fine. I didn't like have any, but I could not quit sex. Sex was the one I tried to quit so many times and I just could not break it. I even went to deliverance. I've had deliverances done on me from other deliverance ministers to make sure, because I was like, maybe there's stuff I'm missing in myself. And like a few times God would show me different levels of myself that they could see that I couldn't, you know, so it really did help. But like, I just couldn't overcome this sex addiction. And so then as of, I'm trying to think of when. So then anyway, so this is something I'm really struggling with. And I'm like, God, I don't know. I can't, you're calling me to be, and all these people see me online as like this man of God and like being so obedient when I'm still just a man and I'm still struggling with this addiction that I cannot kick. And so finally, he really helps me, and it showed me a different level inside of myself where I had an idol built to sex. I had an idol built to sex. I had an idol built to men. I had an idol built to my genitals, because it was like, and I realized, I was like, oh my gosh, that's a problem, because I don't have any of these spirits in me. I've gotten rid of those. I beat those spirits, but I still had these little idols formed inside of my spirit dedicated to these things. And so it's like, no matter how much I tried to not listen to them or not look at them, it was like they were still controlling my mind and still shaping the way that my mind thought. So I ask you just to please forgive me for building these, ask him to destroy them, wash them away, fully surrender myself to him. Honestly, that was like the light bulb moment where, not to say like I've never struggled with it again, but it's not, before it was always like this siren song, you know, like the mermaid singing that crash sailors into ships, or crash sailors into rocks. It was like this song that I couldn't listen to, and I was always just like, oh, like I can't listen to it, like, oh, it's always there and it's always playing, but I just like, oh, like don't listen to it. But like once I destroyed the idols to it, it was like I was free. And I was like, it was a whole new level of free than even when getting rid of deliverance and getting rid of the spirits of lust and all this stuff. And so I was like, wow. I was like, this is so crazy. And like, ever since then, it's been so easy where now it's like I only deal with that lust and stuff if I choose to give into it, you know, where it's not like this siren song anymore. And it's like, I feel like, but it's only come from me fully just surrendering every aspect of my life to God and relentlessly pursuing and seeking after him no matter what, because that's what I realized, where it's like all this other stuff, even when I hear other Christians like say like, oh, I used to be gay and then God changed me, and I hate that. Like, it's so cheesy and stupid. I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. But like, that's why I'm like, even like all these labels and stuff, I hate the labels, you know, and that's what the world Satan tries to label us and get us to identify like, oh, I'm an alcoholic. Oh, I'm gay. You know, like he tries to make you identify by these sins that you like or that your flesh craves. And so then you start identifying that and you start like seeing yourself as that instead of seeing yourself as your strength and your virtues that God created you to be. And that's what God says, is we need to make our identity in him, where it's like I had to learn to make my identity in him alone instead of seeing it as like my sex addiction or that I like sex. Like, no, I am his tool he put here on this earth to help other people get rid of demons and to help people get spiritually free. I know that deep to my core. No one can ever deny that. The only thing I'm more sure of is that Jesus Christ is my Savior and that God is real. Those are the only things I'm more certain of. And now I wouldn't even say more certain. It's just like an undeniable truth that I have within my being, that it's like now I know I'm doing, and I've started stepping into my calling. So anyway, so that was last summer that I finally destroyed those idols to sex. So then God keeps telling me to go to Indonesia and stuff, and I was like, God, it doesn't work. But so then I tell my personal training clients too that September is going to be my last month. September also happens to be the last month of the lease for my apartment in Scottsdale. So I was like, oh, it's like, well, if I'm going to be doing this deliverance full time online, I was like, I can do it from anywhere. I could start traveling, which I've always wanted to just travel and like work remotely anyway. So I was like, well, that'd be pretty sick. So then my cousin and her husband, who I'm really good friends with, both of them, they work remotely and they just travel around the world and just go to different places and live there for like a month and work there. And so they asked me, they're like, hey, like I was telling my plans and stuff, and they're like, oh, well, they're like, if you're going to be working remotely, you should come to Bali with us. They're like, we're going for the month of October with my cousin's husband's company that he works for. And they're like, we're going to be living there for a month. You can stay with us and stuff. And I was like, oh, I'd love to. I've always wanted to go to Bali. And then I didn't even realize at the time, but Bali was in Indonesia. And I was like, oh, that's where God's been telling me to go. So it just worked out. But this was where a big step of faith, because after like having to close out of my lease for my apartment and all this stuff, like it literally took every last dollar that I had to buy the ticket to Bali and pay for my place to stay there. So I was like, okay, God, I was like, I know you're telling me to do this. And he was like, yes, 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 yes. And I was like, okay, God, like I'm really stepping out on faith here. I was like, if one thing goes wrong, if I get one mischarge for something, if I get one thing, I'm screwed. I don't have any more money. My credit cards are capped. I'm like, I don't have any money. Like I'm spending it all on this. So I was like, I know you want me to go here, right? And I was really praying on it, and I was very clear. So I was like, okay. So I did it. Went to Bali. There. So before this, too, he had me replace a principality over Scottsdale. And I remember, so this was like back when I was still with my ex of a long time, when we were together, my last ex-boyfriend. When we were together, so he lived in Goodyear, Arizona. So basically we lived in Goodyear because I was always over there, like I said. And he had but I was still going to church sometimes when I wasn't with him to this church in Scottsdale. And a lot of times when I would go there, I would see stuff attacking Scottsdale. So, and Scottsdale, I knew, always felt really dark and heavy, at least the past year. So, and interesting enough, I think it was 2023 or 2022, the first ever satanic conference was held in Scottsdale, Arizona. The first ever satanic conference in the entire world was held in Scottsdale, Arizona, because of some legal dispute that happened between the Church of Satan and the city government of Scottsdale, where the city wouldn't let them build some statue to Satan or something. So to spite them, they decided to throw the world's first ever satanic conference there. So it was like ever since then, I had noticed that the spiritual atmosphere in Scottsdale, especially around Old Town, was very demonic and dark. So I remember one time in church feeling it, and this church like was on fire for God. There was angels everywhere. The pastor, when he would speak, the Holy Spirit would flow out of him. And so I loved this church, and I remember seeing like over the church, the spirit over Scott. It was a spirit of witchcraft. And it was like, looked like the swirling dark mass of like shadows and like spiders. And it was like screaming at the church, and it was like trying to smash it in the spirit. And God told me I needed to rebuke it and get rid of it. And I was like, bro, what? Because I've told my whole life, like from Christians, like do not pray against principalities. Like you don't do that unless you're called to, or like you don't do that unless God tells you to. And I was like, okay, well, God, I was like, I don't know. And he's like, I'm going to tell you what to say. And I was like, okay. So he's like, you're going to intercede on behalf of all of Scottsdale right now. I was like, okay. So he's like, so look at it. And I could see it was attached to like, the entirety of Scottsdale, like the entire city. So I was like, okay, God, like, what do I pray? And he's like, ask me to forgive every sin, inequity, and transgression ever done here in the land, to the land itself, or underneath the land. And I was like, okay, I did that. Then he had me rebuke and undo every curse, hex, spell, incantation, voodoo, sorcery, form of witchcraft, dark art, or other form of weaponized demonic or satanic activity, energy, vibration, frequency, word, thought, or intention, sending against the land of Scottsdale ever done in Scottsdale, underneath it, or above it in the past, present, and future. The spirit started floating off, and it looked like its eyes, and it was like looking at me. It was like, couldn't believe I did this. Then God told me to cast it into the Pacific Ocean. So I prayed and did that. It did that. Had me bless and consecrate and wash the whole land of Scottsdale clean with the blood of Jesus Christ. And he told me to ask him to replace it, because he said that there always has to be a spirit in charge. And if he doesn't replace it or appoint a new one, something else is going to take over. So I asked him to, and he placed down this spirit. It looked like a woman made out of pink fire, and it was a spirit of kindness. So after this, I was like, wow, I felt a huge difference in Scottsdale ever since. The next day, or the following week, my ex-boyfriend, he had one of his best friends was visiting from New York. Never been to Arizona before. One of the days that she was visiting us, we went to Scottsdale. We went out to dinner there and stuff, and all day she kept saying, wow, everyone is so kind here. She specifically said the word kind, which I thought was weird, because I was like, you wouldn't say nice or something? She kept saying word kind, and that was the spirit I saw God place over Scottsdale. So I was just like, what? I was like, then it was funny, because then 2 days later, one of my friends at a church service that I wasn't able to go to, I missed, she was saying like, oh yeah, the whole message today was about how Scottsdale as a whole needs to be more kind. And I was like, looked at her, I was like, what'd you just say? And I was like, and it was just like, I kept getting all these little confirmations like that God was like, see, what you did is affecting Scottsdale on a big level. I was like, wow. So when he would tell me to go to Bali, and I get to Bali, I was like, okay, like he's going to have me, because I knew it was to replace the principality there and stuff. So I get there, see this massive principality over all of Bali, and it's a spirit of, it looks like this giant hairy goblin thing, that's just like oozing and has like all these big sores on it that are just oozing this green slime that's just sludging out and like covering all of the island of Bali. And it was a spirit of overindulgence. So as soon as we land, I start praying. I'm like, okay, I'm going to do it. And the guy's like, no, stop. And he like turned off my vision and everything. And he was like, stop. And I was like, what do you mean? I was like, isn't that why you sent me here? He's like, yes, but not right now. He's like, you will, basically told me I'll get my ass handed to me if I did it right then. So he's like, you need to wait until Friday or something. And I was like, what? I was like, okay. So I was like a week after, and I was like, okay, whatever. So then, gets so complicated. So basically then I was doing a deliverance session with someone. It was the first day that I was doing deliverance sessions there online in my Airbnb I was staying at. And I see this spirit does not like me doing that. And also, the island of Bali was extremely heavy. The main religion on the island is Hinduism. So they have like little temples. Every other building is a Hindu temple. All these demons just everywhere. There's all these little smoking offerings everywhere on the street for like these spirits. So it's just it's like they're welcoming in all these spirits. Not a single angel in sight anywhere. And I realized I had never been to a predominantly a region or a country that wasn't Christian. So I was like, oh, this is the first time ever being in a Hindu country. This is why. And so then with that, I started noticing. So like during the deliverance session I was doing with my client, he was based in Wales, in the UK. And while we were doing our session, I watched the spirit of overindulgence come and stand over my Airbnb. It's like he's looking down on me, just glaring at me. And God told me, and I was like, God, do you want me to do it now? Because it was the day that he'd been telling me that I was going to. And he's like, no, not yet. He's like, deal with this, help your client first, and then we'll help, you will get rid of him after. I was like, okay. So then he sends angels, because then the spirit starts like throwing like these balls of slime at me, but then these angels come and like block it, and they're like fighting it while I'm doing this deliverance session. So I finished the deliverance session, and God's like, okay, now you can. So I pray over the whole island of Bali, do the same thing as I did in Scottsdale, get rid of it, kick it out as God instructs me to. Now he appoints a new ruling spirit over it. I forget what it was, but it was a new angelic spirit over Bali. Then later, he has me, then I start like, I have a call with my friend Dakota Lee, who's really big on social media. She can also see the spirit realm and stuff. And she was starting a new podcast, and she wanted me to be the first guest on her podcast. So she has this whole thing recorded. And during it, she got a prophetic word that she felt she needed to speak over me. As soon as she starts speaking it, my stomach just like, something happened in it. And it was like a worse pain than when my appendix burst. Like it was so bad. I was like, I have to go. And I ran to the bathroom, exploding from both ends for like 10 minutes, came out, and I was like, so I feel like something spiritual is going on. And she was like, yeah. So she's like, let me finish praying over you first. And she starts again, same thing happens. I have to go and explode in the bathroom again for 10 minutes. Come back, and we're like, okay, we need to pray and stuff, and we're doing it. And I can see there's 4 spirits, principalities attacking me. It's the ruling spirit over the island or the city that I was staying in Bali. Then there was also the ruling spirit over the sea surrounding all of Indonesia. Then it was the ruling spirit over all of Indonesia and its pet. It had like a pet. And the ruling spirit over all of Indonesia was Allah. And I was like, God was showing me Allah. And I was like, Allah. He had 2 right arms. It was this big black shadow looking demon thing. 2 feet, but 1 shin. Where 1 shin should have been, it was just like blank air. And I was like, well, he was standing over all of Indonesia. And I later found out that Indonesia has more Muslims than any other country in the world. So at first when I was seeing this, I was like, bro, what? I was like, this is crazy. Then I also look up later, Allah, 2 right arms. I guess there's some passage in the Quran where it talks about him. It says Allah has 2 right arms. And you find there's these 1,000 or several hundred-year-old ancient statues that have been found of Allah from when he was worshipped as a pagan god before he was put over Islam and stuff. And he is depicted exactly how I see him in the spirit realm. If you just look up like Allah 2 right arms, it's some of the first images that pop up on Google. You'll see it. Looks exactly how I saw him. And I was like, wow. And so God has me fight, and me and Dakota praying over all of Bali, Indonesia, and replacing all these spirits. Then it's rest. Like all these angels pour in over it and stuff. Ever since then, I've heard from my friends in Bali that work at churches in Bali and stuff. They said the churches have been exploding there. That all these people are turning away from Islam and becoming Christian, getting visions of God. They're joining the church. They're not having enough room for their churches. They're having to start new churches in Indonesia. So it's really beautiful to see. After that, I was like, oh, after Bali, I'll go to like Thailand next or Vietnam or something. And God was like, no, you're going to go to the UK. And I was like, the UK? I was like, in November. I was like, bro, I only pack short sleeves for Bali. And he's like, you'll buy clothes there. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah. He's like, you're going to go to London for a week. Then you're going to go to Cardiff, Wales for a few days. Then you're going to go to Edinburgh, Scotland for a week. And I was like, okay. And so he had me book all these things and all this stuff. And I was like, literally, I tell all my friends and stuff there, and they're like, you're going to the UK next? And like all my other friends were going to Thailand or Vietnam and stuff. And like even all my friends in Bali a lot of the friends I made there were from the UK, and they're like, Phoenix. They're like, you don't go to the UK in November. And like some of the friends I made weren't Christian, so I was like going to be like, oh yeah, God told me to go there. So I was just like, well, I was like, I don't know, I just feel like it would be fun or something. So it doesn't make sense to anyone else. Even I tell some of my family and stuff, and they're like, God's telling you to go to Bali, now he wants you to go to the UK, to London. And I was like, yeah. And go there, that's a whole other crazy story. Confirmation after confirmation. Ever since then, God told me that when I was in Bali, he said, this is just the beginning of your world tour, and that this is just the beginning of what I'm going to be having you do. So ever since then, I've been fully surrendered to the Lord. Pretty much I don't do anything outside of his will and desires for myself. And I have just been traveling the world, go to whatever country he tells me to, however long to, pray against whatever he wants me to pray against there, kick out whoever he wants me to kick out, meet people, do deliverances for people, and I just do deliverance for people online over Zoom pretty much full time. And I have never been more fulfilled in life. He has fulfilled every single dream of mine, where I'm living in Scottsdale, Arizona. That's where I'm based out of. Sounds stupid, but I've always wanted to live there. The apartment that I've always wanted to live into, I'm going to be moving in there later this year. I get to travel the world and fight demons. That's literally sounds like the coolest thing ever to me. And I am just more fulfilled and more complete. I just want to thank you guys for watching my testimony. Hopefully it helps some of you guys with whatever it is you're dealing with. And I just encourage you to seek God first and foremost above literally every other aspect and everything else in life, because that is the only thing that matters. That is the only thing that will lead to fulfillment. That is the only thing that'll break away the chains and the slavery that sin brings. So God bless you guys.
Thank you guys so much for watching this testimony. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope that the Lord encountered you, freed you, even healed you in some areas. And if you want to watch more, come follow our page and subscribe to Unfiltered Freedom Testimonies. And if you want your testimony to be in it, reach out to us, and we're excited to see what God's going to do. In Jesus' name, amen.